see our guest from Westfield Academy here with us this morning. It is a very sad duty to inform Executive formally of the passing of Councillor Dean Ruddle, formerly our portfolio holder for adult social care. Dean was a remarkable advocate for his community. He was a great colleague and a superb mate. He brought his business acumen to the role of lead member for adult social care since taking on the role last May. But with it, he has shown a dedication and compassion to those residents of Somerset who are most in need of our support and care. I know we will all be devastated by Dean's loss, colleagues, friends, staff, communities, as this news sinks in. Somerset Council extends its sincerest sympathies to Rachel and all of Dean's family as they struggle to cope with this shocking, sudden and unexpected news. Rest in peace, Mr. Somerton. You will be greatly missed. May I ask all who were able to stand for a minute in silence in memory of Dean. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, and please excuse those of us who will see Dean's name on several places in these papers. It is quite difficult that somebody who was sat in the room just a few days ago is no longer with us, and we are feeling the loss very keenly, as I'm sure you'll appreciate. It is my duty to welcome you all to this meeting of the Executive. To remind you, it is only members of the Executive lead members present in this room that are taking any decisions at this meeting. Others in attendance are here to provide advice to the Executive. The agendas and papers have been published on the Council website in advance of the meeting. The Council will be making a recording of the meeting, and this will be published in due course. I'd particularly like to welcome this morning two new appointments to the Executive. That's Councillor Heather Shearer, who's taken over as lead member for Children, Families and Education, and Councillor Richard Wilkins, lead member for Transport and Digital. This is their first Executive meeting in their new roles, and to extend my sincere thanks to their predecessors, Councillor Tessa Munt and Councillor Mike Rigby, for all that they've done in their period of office. So to highlight today's meeting, it will be run using a hybrid format. The Executive lead members and key officers are physically present in the John Meikle room at the Dean House in Taunton. Key officers present include, to my right, the Chief Executive Duncan Sharkey, and to his right, the Executive Director for Resources and Corporate Services, Jason Vaughan, and to my left, our Monitoring Officer, David Clark. Other elected members and officers may physically or remotely join the meeting and speak on specific agenda items, or they may be here just to observe. The meeting is being broadcast, and therefore other members of the public and partners can observe the meeting remotely. Please, if you are online, could you only use the chat function for the purposes of the meeting and primarily just to indicate that you wish to speak? So I'd prefer it if you could use the raise hands function. You are only to speak at my invitation, and could you please kindly say your name before speaking? Can I remind those online the importance of turning off microphones and cameras when not speaking? So item 1 on our agenda is apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence, please? Adam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have to leave around 12 o'clock today as I have a funeral to attend this afternoon. I do apologise for that, but I do need to go and show my respect today. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe we've also got apologies from Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts and also Fran as well as an associate. I need to take a phone call, which is a medical appointment now. So I'm just going to ask Liz Lyshon whether she could just take over the chair while I take that phone call, and I'll be back shortly. My apologies for the inconvenient timing of this call.
And I also give Val Keach's apologies as she has an hospital appointment this morning. And she did let us know last night that she won't be able to attend this morning's meeting. So if that could be minuted, I'd be most grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. So again, my name is Liz Lyshon. I'm Deputy Leader of this council. I'm just covering for Bill while he takes his call. And as soon as he comes back into the room, I'll return to my original seat. Got Councillor Jo Randall Green.
Yes, thank you, Jo. Yes, I will, like Adam, I have a funeral to attend, so I shall be leaving early. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's all the apologies. We move now to item 2, which are the minutes of the executive meeting held on the 6th of December. I have one amendment to propose on these minutes. If I do that amendment first, and then I'll come to colleagues to see whether they wish to make any other amendments or whether they're happy with these minutes. So under item 79 on the 24-25 paper, on the second paragraph concerning alignment of the work of scrutiny, corporate and resources and the audit committee, I just wish to amend that line to say the work to align the work of scrutiny, corporate and resources and the audit committee in the democratic calendar. Obviously, the audit committee has a very important legal function in any council and is separate from scrutiny. So I was just looking for that minute to say that we were aligning the work within the democratic calendar. Do any colleagues have any other further comments or amendments for the minutes, or are we all happy to accept those minutes with the amendment that I have already described? So no dissenters, so we will accept those minutes with the amendment. Councillor Roswyk. So if I take a proposer, that will be Councillor Wyke, and a seconder. Oh, we've got lots. I'll go to the other side of the room. Councillor Heather Shearer to second. Let's all do in the time-on fashion, show our hands if we are happy to accept those minutes as a true record with the one amendment. Thank you very much, colleagues. So we move now to item 3, declarations of interest. Of course, we have the standing declarations of interest for anyone who's on parish, town, city council. Does anyone else on the executive have a declaration of interest that is affected by the agenda today? Any further declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. So now we move to public question time. Now, my understanding is that we will take some of the questions now, and we will take questions from Alan Debenham and Nigel Behan with item 7, where they belong. That's my understanding. I'm looking to David Clark as monitoring officer to correct me if I get any of this wrong, because you obviously did more preparation with Councillor Evans than with me. Are we taking all the other questions now at this time?
It's my understanding, Chair. It's your discretion.
Okay, so we will take the list in the order that I have it here on the chair's schedule. We will, Alan Debenham and Nigel Bean, I hope that you're happy whether you're online or in the room. I don't think you are in the room. Happy that your questions come before item 7, if that's okay, please.
Yes.
I think yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. So we have Eva Brykowski. Is Eva with us in the room or is Eva online? No. So we ask the monitoring officer to read Eva's question, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm asking on behalf of Joe, a local councillor in Glastonbury, who is also a busy farmer. Number 1, could this... Sorry, Eva, if you would, if you're happy to read your own question out, then I'll pass the honour over to you. You're on mute, Eva. Can you unmute yourself and then ask your question?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I had some trouble with my car, and so I haven't got the questions in front of me, but from my memory, it's really about the effect on local councils. You know, because of the, the emergency crisis. So I was asking for a farmer who's actually a councillor on Glastonbury Town Council, and also a farmer who literally lives over the road from me. Some of you might know him, Martin Watts. He could have come today, but he's got meetings with drainage boards. He's asking, seeing as we're all in it together, making cuts and everything to balance the books, what are councillors going to do about expenses? Are you going to cut your expenses? Because he understands you get free parking, you get free membership of clubs and for attendance. But really it's about local councils bearing the brunt of the problems, with the exponential rises in costs for social care, children's services and other things. So basically, I can't remember one of the other questions, if anybody could remind me. But it's basically, what is the effect on locally in every way?
Thank you, Eva. If I may just come in to say that all members of the executive do have your detailed questions in writing. I do know Joe the farmer, because I come across him when I was county councillor for Glastonbury. I saw him a lot. He contributes a great deal to the local community, and his understanding, like yours, of how Somerset runs and the challenges for Somerset is impressive. If you don't mind, because we have all the questions in writing, I'd like to go to Councillor Theo Butt-Philip for the answer to your questions as they stand on our written papers. Is that okay, Theo?
Thank you very much, Liz. And thank you for your question, Eva. In addition to the debates now underway in a number of our local community networks, discussion and engagement is ongoing with city, town and parish council partners. It is clear that given the funding challenges that are well documented, we know that the Unitary Council will not be able to continue to deliver some of the services that our local communities have come to expect from Somerset Council. Moreover, there are examples where local communities are better placed to determine which services are important to them and the standard to which they should be delivered. This is not about setting an expectation of what local councils must do, but enabling them to take on services should they wish to, particularly where Somerset Council is no longer able to. We are working closely with the sector, including with the Somerset Association of Local Councils and the Society of Local Council Clerks, to support the transition of some city, town and parish councils as they consider this. Regarding your query relating to environmental and rural issues, I'm sure that this will be a key area of focus for our local community networks where they have determined it is a priority.
Thank you. Thank you, Theo. Thank you very much, Eva. I'm sure we'll see you again soon at another council meeting. We've got plenty of them coming up over the next weeks. Thank you very much for your continuing interest in the future of Somerset Council and our home county. Thank you. So next, I'm going to go to Ray Tostavin, Chair of the Quicksilver Community Group. I believe you're online. Thank you very much. Ray, if you would like to put your question, you have 3 minutes, obviously, but again, we have your question in written form here. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Ray Tostavin, Quicksilver Community Group. The future of emergency stroke services at Yeovil Hospital has been the subject of an extensive public consultation by NHS Somerset. Later this month, the Integrated Care Board is due to release its final decision-making business plan to close Yeovil's hyperacute stroke unit and move emergency stroke care to Musgrove Park in Taunton. The plans have been described by the lead stroke specialist at Yeovil Hospital as ill-conceived. The council's own Adults and Health Scrutiny Committee has already voiced its collective concern. Members have not been convinced that the current plan changes to emergency stroke care will be in the best interest of all residents of Somerset. They've urged the ICB to delay any proposed changes and come back with revised plans. The council leader, Bill Revans, indicated at full council just before Christmas he'd received a reply from NHS Somerset in response to councillors' request to delay any final decision on Somerset's emergency stroke care provision. So my question, what have NHS Somerset ICB actually said to Councillor Revans in their reply? And has the ICB agreed to delay releasing any final decision on the future of Yeovil's hyperacute stroke unit to allow more time for alternatives to be brought forward? It's vital all residents of Somerset receive the highest standard of emergency stroke treatment and care, no matter in which part of the county they live. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tostavin. I'm going to read Bill Revans' response to you, but I am sure that you know that Bill will always be happy to meet with you online or in person to discuss this further, because obviously, whilst we limit you to 3 minutes, we don't want to take 30 minutes in responding to every question too. So please understand that this is subject to you being able to spend more time with Bill. So Bill's response. Thank you for the question regarding the Somerset acute-based stroke reconfiguration proposal. This is obviously a decision with huge impacts for the population of Somerset and Dorset as well. After seeing the concerns from fellow councillors, especially from HOSC, and being made aware of the letter Dr. Rashid sent to the ICB, that's Bill Revans, met with the ICB chair and chief executive last week to ensure that all views will be taken into account and properly considered as part of the decision-making process. To that end, the ICB have offered a meeting to any member of HOSC who didn't feel fully informed at their meeting, so the ICB can address any issues with the conduct of the meeting and feedback to their board as appropriate any outstanding issues. I can confirm, again that's Bill, that the ICB will be engaging with and responding in full to Dr. Rashid. I understand this information will also be available as part of their board decision-making pack. You specifically asked about the ICB response, and I, Bill, can confirm that the ICB responded on the 18th of December to the letter written on behalf of the Adults and Health Scrutiny Committee. In their letter, the ICB outlined the extensive programme that has been undertaken over the preceding 6 years to improve stroke services within the area. In short, the ICB letter says, I will read this out because I think it will be informative and helpful to you, but again, you will, I'm sure, have more time with Bill Revans. So, with regards to the acute-based stroke service proposal, the letter outlined that the current configuration of stroke care is not meeting the national standards and that the ambition is to achieve high-quality stroke care 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. To achieve this, doctors, nurses, and other professionals involved in stroke care, people with lived experience, including carers, and voluntary community, faith, social enterprise organisations came together to identify a long list of potential solutions for transforming acute hospital-based stroke services in Somerset. This list was reviewed with a broad range of professional and clinical stakeholders at a facilitated workshop. The letter goes on. This long list of options included 4 options, which would see a HASU retained at Yeovil District Hospital, and 2 options where HASU services would be shared either with Dorset County Hospital or Musgrove Park Hospital. A set of hurdle criteria were used by a range of expert groups to assess each of the options using a pass-fail criterion. This resulted in 4 options being retained. 2 options included retaining a HASU in Yeovil. The 4 shortlisted options were reviewed by the South West Clinical Senate in September 2022, and the panel deemed that the 2 options that proposed retaining an HASU at Yeovil would not address the reasons set out in the case for change, and that the remaining 2 options were consistent with a strong clinical evidence base. That's the end of quoting from the letter. The Bill's response goes on. The ICB has assured me that the outcome they seek by reshaping the service is very much about better outcomes for patients. This review, undertaken over many years, has followed an extensive, independently led public consultation exercise, which included seeking the views of the committee and those in rural areas. The ICB have told me, Bill, that they do not believe any new information is available, which would necessitate the need to repeat this process. They acknowledge the need to ensure the business case makes clear how rural communities will not be further disadvantaged as part of the configuration, and this will be reflected in the equality impact assessment. The ICB does not believe, therefore, that there is a need to delay its decision-making on the business case. The ICB will continue to liaise with the Council to ensure relevant committees and stakeholders are kept updated on progress. So apologies, Mr. Tostevin and colleagues, that was quite a long response. As Bill is not in the chair at this moment, I wanted to read their response in full. I'm delighted to tell you that I can just see out of the corner of my eye that Bill is back in the room now, and I'd better warn Councillor Evans that I have offered your time to meet with Mr. Tostevin either in person or online if he wishes to discuss this response any further. So at this point, I will stand up, hope that I pick up all the right pieces of paper and return to my chair and allow Bill back into the chair.
Thank you, colleagues, and my apologies for having to step out. It's absolutely, you'll understand the necessity to speak to those people who are monitoring my health. Mr. Tostevin, so sorry I had to step out at the crucial moment of your question, and I'm delighted to confirm whatever Liz Lyshon has promised on my behalf. I'm very happy to meet with you If you'd like to contact me, we can arrange that separately.
I appreciate that, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I believe we're moving on to David Redwell next. Do we have David in the room?
Thank you,
online.
Chair. Can you hear me, Chair?
Well, yes. Good morning, David. Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Bill. So my questions again are as a member of the Somerset Bus Advisory Board, advising on the BSIP and the public transport network, and with consultation with colleagues. So our concerns really are this. Firstly, we're very concerned, as is the Police and Crime Commissioner, and we had a panel meeting of the Community Safety Partnership, which covers particularly the north of the county, which met with SARI on last week, and there was extreme concern about switching off cameras at Wells bus station and in the city of Wales and in the Mendip towns, particularly where the bus network is involved. And also we're concerned because also First Bus, who wrote to me this morning, that's for Wales and West Division, Rob Pym, I put on record, is also concerned about things like no cameras overnight when they park the buses that run on Somerset's contracts in the bus depot, which is a very successful setup, Bill, thanks to Mike Rigby, but we need to have the safety of the passengers. Also, that bus station, as a county bus station, functions well past midnight with buses to and from Bristol and Bath towards Glastonbury Street. So we've got to have community safety. Same thing applies to places like Yeovil and to Bridgewater and the and Shepton Mallet interchange. So we're extremely concerned about the safety of passengers, as is Mark Shelford. And I see Ian Granger is also quite concerned about the bus issues in the county. The other point is about the tenders. I mean, if you are going to re-tender, please don't do all at once. Dorset did that to save money and only had one contractor and got into a very difficult situation. If you are going to do something like that, do over a period of a year. You may make savings with Stagecoach and First Group and Go Ahead and other smaller operators on your tendered network. But I'm not sure those savings will be huge, maybe £100,000 per contract. On public toilets, again, we are extremely concerned about the public toilets, especially the ones that serve bus hubs, bus stations, and towards anywhere near railway stations where the county provides those services. We know Wales is provided by Wales City, but others we believe are provided on legacy from the district councils that made up the county. So there is a considerable amount of concern. I wondered if you'd raised with Mark Shelford was any money available from the Police and Crime Commissioner. He has a certain amount of budget, not huge, towards CTCTV. Our concern with CTCTV, it's a statutory undertaking in terms of safety, and we're not sure of anywhere that parish councils take this over, because we understand there's standard control centres which are run by, usually run by the county or by the districts. So are extremely concerned about this issue, and we need a safe public transport network. And I've got to pay tribute because we've been building this up slowly with all the problems that we've had with First, with punctuality, reliability and First South. But we are building a network of getting people back
to a close, David. Thanks.
Yeah, we are building on something successful, getting people back onto public transport. And if I just to say, when we get to rail interface, please make sure CCTV is not cut off on station approaches. Thank you, Bill, and thanks for your support.
Thank you, David, and just pass over to Councillor Richard Wilkins for the response to that question. But before I do that, Ava, I don't know whether you're aware, but your camera is still on, and we've got we're obviously watching your dining room live here in the John Meikle room. I don't wonder whether you could just pop your camera off. It helps with our bandwidth. And Richard.
Hello, David, and thanks for the questions. I'm going to answer your written questions in the order you gave them, rather than but not working. Okay, sorry. Well, with your first question, which was to do with the proposed budget report to review the support of the bus network in Somerset, which would include all services mentioned, for instance, the 54, the 25, the 28 and the 58, as well as the 1. If taken forward, officers will carry out a review, and any proposal that involves significant changes will be subject to a formal public consultation process. With regard to the 4 at-risk services, 25, 28, 54, 58 and 58A mentioned, these are all currently being supported with BSIP Plus funding from the government. The operator will be reviewing the impact of patronage and of promotional work undertaken since September 2023 and making a decision on the future of the service, which they will be required to present at the Bus Advisory Board meeting on 6th of February 2024. Any changes to these services will be implemented from the agreed changes date of the 15th of April 2024 and will maintain BSIP Plus funding until that date. Your second question, and kind of the first question you asked online in regard to CCTV, I'd like to thank you for raising your concerns of the impact the CCTV changes would have, especially regarding the safety of bus passengers, waiting at the coach stations and stops mentioned in your question. No decisions have been made yet, and appropriate consultation will be undertaken. Your third question is about the visitor centres. Visitor centre could be jointly located with a transport hub at Dean House as a public service hub, retained in its current location or placed in a number of other buildings. The saving options put forward by the community services is to close the visitor centre due to the cost of operating them. The greatest part of this cost being the staffing resources rather than the accommodation cost. If this service can be delivered in partnership and at a reduced cost, this would of course be preferable to closure. Discussions are ongoing with Taunton and Yeovil Town Council regarding potential service funding and or devolution. And thank you very much, David, for all the work you've been doing, by the way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Wilkins. I'm aware, I've been told that some members who are here to hear answers on the Yeovil Rec issue I will need to leave possibly before we discuss that. And I would very much like to take the public questions on that at this point so that people have got the opportunity to the answers, or the questions and the answers on those. And though, of course, it will be dealt with fully under item 7. So if we go to the next public speaker, would be Joanna Stevenson of Yeovil and Sherborne Hockey Club. Have we got Joanna here? If you take a seat there and if you press the button on the right, it should light up in red and then we can all hear you.
That one? Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I timed myself. Thank you. Okay. Yeovil Rec has been the home of Yeovil and Sherborne Hockey Club since 2013. The artificial pitch was laid as it was recognised there was a shortfall in the provision of sports pitches in South Somerset. Following this, the provision of all sports facilities was reviewed by the SSDC in 2017 as part of the playing pitch strategy. And the need for even more open spaces and sports provision was a key part of this strategy that has subsequently been adopted by the current council. The hockey club has over 500 members playing hockey throughout the year at junior, senior, masters level, at weekends and in the evenings. Clubs from around the country travel to play fixtures at Yeovil. The league matches and tournaments we host at weekends bring visitors and therefore custom to the town and surrounding area. Our players acknowledge the positive impact playing hockey has had on their personal fitness and mental well-being, and it has been a lifesaver for those dealing with serious illnesses. The club provides opportunities for members of the local community to participate in sport and organises taster sessions in schools, hockey holiday camps and school festivals. The pitch is used independently by local schools and by football clubs. Children who attend these establishments have become valued members of the club over the years, playing at junior and now playing in senior teams. The construction of the artificial pitch in 2013 was a collaborative venture between SDC, the hockey club and England Hockey, with each party contributing significant funds towards its construction. The club continues to invest in this facility and has just made a contribution of £10,000 towards the provision of equipment so the cafe can provide players with meals and bring more income to the rec. In March 23, the 10-year community use agreement was renewed and obligates the council to provide the club with access to the facilities until 2033. It commits all parties to look for ways of guaranteeing the long-term sustainability, as this pitch is the only approved league hockey surface in South Somerset. While there may well be opportunities for hockey to continue elsewhere, it will have a detrimental effect on the local community, as many take part in activities at the rec because it's an easily accessible resource. It would be devastating if these facilities we've worked so hard to establish between us were abandoned or recommissioned, as we know that once they've gone, they'll be gone for good. It would be another nail in the coffin of the area of South Somerset, which is recognised as one of the most deprived areas in the Southwest, where children and young adults need to be nurtured and encouraged to take part in the positive social interactions that team sports provide. The negative impact of these proposals on the health and well-being of this local community should not be underestimated by you, at a time when these issues are at the top of the national agenda and will undoubtedly lead to increased costs elsewhere, in an Olympic year when we should be encouraging young people to have a go at sport and be the best that they can be. Thank you very much.
Take all four of the public speakers on this topic, and then we will have the response. The second speaker will be Jeff Cole from Yeovil Olympiads Athletics Club.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Jeff Cole and I'm Chair of Somerset Athletics Association and of Yeovil Olympiads Athletics Club. Thank you for the opportunity to speak in connection with the proposal to close all managed sport and leisure facilities at Yeovil Recreation Ground. This would mean the closure of the Bill Whistlecroft Athletics Arena. I'm here representing not only the members of our club and all Somerset track and field athletes, but also the thousands of other athletes from all over the Southwest and beyond who visit this regionally important facility each year. As a show of the depth of feeling, we've already received over 12,000 signatures on our petition in a week, a copy of which has been sent to you. I'm also here representing the thousands of children who attend local schools. More than a dozen different schools used the facility last year, and for some of their most vulnerable young people, this may be the only exposure they ever have to a high-quality sporting facility and the opportunity to experience the kind of community cohesion and positivity that comes with sporting events. In 2022, South Somerset was identified as an education investment area due to the low outcomes of children and rising levels of deprivation. And following the recent Centre for Justice report that stated physical activity is key to helping children engage with their education, why would we even consider closing a facility that can offer just that? As a club, we see this on a daily basis, where children who've struggled to access formal learning have thrived within the club, which may well have played a significant role in their ability to remain in education where they were previously at risk. This facility can positively impact children's lives and raise aspirations. The athletics arena, which has been in Yeovil for over 50 years, hosts county, regional and national level competitions that simply cannot be held anywhere else in Somerset. This is a unique facility within the county, the only nationally certified publicly accessible athletics track in Somerset, and we simply cannot afford to lose it. The significance of this facility extends beyond sport. It fosters community spirit, promotes physical and mental health and well-being for people of all ages and abilities, and it contributes to our regional identity. We must ensure that we preserve this facility for current users and future generations. We understand the financial emergency and your position in having to make very difficult decisions. However, if this facility is lost, it will be gone forever. The proposed level of financial savings made by the removal of this critical and acclaimed sports facility is insignificant against its true worth within the community that it serves. We're very willing to work with you, the Town Council and other parties to ensure that that doesn't happen. This multi-award winning facility that is so important to the community in Somerset must remain open. We implore you all to take the proposed closure of the facilities off the table. Thank you.
The third speaker on this I have down is Nick Morts. We have Nick online or in the room. Okay, thanks ever so much. I was given a note, you're on the list as having been here to ask a question, so thank you. And also have Deb Scremmel. No, not seeing or online. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. As mentioned earlier, Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts is unfortunately poorly today, and I believe Councillor Theo Philip is reading the response. Is that correct, Theo? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. Thank you very much, Jeff. And thank you also to everyone who has come here in person today to make clear your feelings about Mudford Rec. Thank you for the questions and for the statements and for so clearly articulating the benefits this facility provides to the local community in Yeovil and beyond. We are aware of the online petition that has been put together and the scale of the response to it. Thank you for sending us a copy. As you will hear later today, and as you will be aware, the Council is facing an unprecedented financial challenge and being forced to consider reducing or removing many of the discretionary services that it provides due to the soaring costs, principally of providing adults and children social care. This is not a position any of us would wish to be in. The facilities at Mudford Rec are clearly well used and well loved. They support active lifestyles and promote sport locally, regionally, and nationally. Should this savings option ultimately be approved by the Council in February, it's not happening today. There are some weeks to go before these decisions will be made. But should the decision be approved, Somerset Council will do everything it can to work with partners to ensure that, despite Somerset Council being unable to continue funding, we hope services at this location can continue. We are already in talks with a number of local partners about the alternative funding models, which we would be delighted to bring forward. We will continue to talk to any third parties who feel that they may be able to provide part of the solution to protecting facilities at Mudford Rec. Finally, I want to address Bella and Henry. Those of us who are here in the room will have been handed a leaflet talking about how much Mudford Rec means to you and how much you value the facilities. You talk about the amazing space and how much joy it gives you. We recognise this. You talk about the potential for the closure of Mudford Rec and the sadness that will spread across the whole town if that happens. Rest assured, we will do what we can to find alternative ways forward if we can. And if we are unable to do that, then the sadness which will spread across the town will spread into this executive as well.
Thank you, Theo. And I'm sure you all appreciate that the situation we find ourselves at Somerset Council is unprecedented and the decisions that we make are heartbreaking. But on this and other savings line, we will leave no stone unturned in trying to find a solution that allows these services, which we appreciate are much loved and much valued by the residents of Yeovil and far, far beyond. We will do everything we can to be able to do this. However, we have a legal duty on the 20th of February to deliver a balanced budget. No decisions will be made today. This paper will be passed on to our scrutiny committee, which meets on the 1st of February. We then meet again as an executive on the 7th of February, and it will go to our full council on the 20th of February. All of those are opportunities at which the local community and organisations can be involved in that decision-making process. And our door is absolutely open to any partners that want to work with us to keep this much-loved facility going. I do appreciate everybody coming and taking the time today to speak with us and taking the time to share their concerns with us. We are very much listening and we will do everything we can to find a solution. I believe that concludes our public question time, but we've got two we're holding over for item 7. Is that correct? Thank you. So we move on to the executive forward plan, which is published on the council websites. Just give us a few moments for our guests to leave. And thank you so much for coming. Okay, thank you. And it brings us on. Sorry, well, I haven't done the forward plan yet, have I? It's only for noting anyway. Are there any comments on the forward plan before we move on to item 6? Not seeing anything. Thank you. So item 6, which is the 2023 General Fund Budget Monitoring Report for month 7 at the end of October 2023. And hand over to Councillor Liz Lysholm to introduce the item and highlight any key points.
Thank you very much, Chair. This is the second budget monitoring report we have seen in the new format following the introduction of software Solver working with Microsoft Dynamics. As this is not a quarterly report, the number of appendices is slightly lower than after at month 6, but we will still cover all the directorates and the corporate costs in detail through the appendices you have before you. I acknowledge that this report is from the end of October, and I look forward to the next report where we will go straight to month 9, quarter 3 at next month's executive meeting. Month 7 shows a small improvement with the introduction of the spending control boards. We look forward to seeing our projected overspend reduce further, as every reduction in overspend this year helps us by retaining more of our reserves. You will note that Table 1 identifies where overspends in adults and children's are reduced by savings in the rest of the council. This particular table was requested by the Audit Committee. We're also now showing special grants from government on separate lines so that we have better understanding of where those monies come from from some central government to fund specific parts of the council's delivery of services. I will now hand over chair to Nicola Hicks, Service Director for Finance and Procurement, to highlight some key points from this paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lyshan. So as mentioned, this is the updated budget monitoring report, and as Liz said, the table inserted in the front page of the report was to explicitly show where the overspends were coming and where the underspends were coming. So we were totally transparent about the effect adults and children are having on our budget compared to the remainder of the council, which is actually forecasting an underspend of 10.5 million. The overspend in adults is detailed in Appendix 1, Table 1 on page 53. This shows it is largely down to care home placements and delivery of home care. At the top of page 57, though, you will see there are a list of mitigations that are being looked at in relation to this budget, which are not reflected in the figures, but we should start to see these reflected in the coming months. For children's, the overspend is detailed in Appendix 2 on page 60, which explains that the increase in forecast overspend from the prior month of 0.6 is mainly due to residential care placements. Although this increase is not welcomed, this is not as much as it could have been if the service weren't able to move the children from unregistered placements, which they have kind of had an increase in the amount they have had to move, because of course unregistered placements are more costly than residential care placements. Again, mitigating controls can be seen on page 63, and we will monitor them going forward more closely. Going back to the main body of the report, on the second page, on page 44, it details about the current spend boards that are in place. We hope to be able to quantify the effect these boards are having in more detail in the Q3 report that's coming in February. Indications at present are that these boards are having a positive effect, and we are seeing the value of our payment runs going out from the council each week reduced. And the fact that we are questioning more of the spend going out, we are more cited on what kind of each week the spend is allocated to. The council already had a policy for no purchase order, no payment. However, this was not fully enforced. This is now enforced across the whole council, and work is underway with services to ensure compliance, ensure we're starting to put that in place. The policy enables us to monitor our commitments better, getting payers paid more efficiently, as it follows more of a streamlined process through to payment, and allows for more scrutiny at the purchase stage rather than at the payment stage. So we actually can scrutinise whether we want to spend that money on that at the moment. But overall, the boards show additional controls that are in place to try and mitigate the current year overspend. But in a number of them, because we are seeing the positive effect they're having, won't just remain for this current financial year. We are looking at how they will remain in the next financial year and beyond. But overall, I think the boards have encouraged everyone across the council to think differently, which is another positive impact that we are having. But happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Nicola. I wonder whether Mel Locke would like just to make a comment about Appendix 1 and adult services, and Claire Winter about Appendix 2 on children's services, please. Thank you, Mel.
Just to say that obviously mitigations are in place here. As it says on bottom of page 53, we are overspent by 24.2 million at this moment in time, but I've put mitigations in to reduce this to 14.9 million for this year. We'll continue to do that. The main reason, as has been already highlighted, is the residential nursing placements that have increased. That's increased nationally, but we are a very low fee payer in Somerset and are now paying a little more for that. We continue to mitigate that. We know that this budget is not enough for this year, and therefore we are expecting an increase, hopefully, if the budget goes through in next year, to mitigate these. I think that's all I need to say at this point.
Thank you, and Claire.
Yes, as you can see in the paper, there is a significant overspend projected for children's services. That largely relates to external placements for children in the care system. We are in a nationally market-driven system, and costs for children with increasingly complex needs are increasing all the time. You can see in the paper there are several mitigations listed there in terms of trying to reduce that impact. It is difficult, but we are confident that we'll be able to achieve at least some of those mitigations to reduce the impact on the budget. The other area in children's services relates to transport, home to school transport. That is a market where costs have increased, particularly in relation to taxis for children needing to get to school, particularly children with SEND, where the costs in companies providing taxis in terms of fuel costs and driver costs have increased significantly. There is a significant amount of work taking place to look at reviewing contracts and trying to reduce costs while making sure that children can still get to school effectively and safely.
Okay, thank you for those summaries. First of all, open up to lead members and associate lead members for any comments, questions or observations, please. Councillor Wakefield.
Yes, thank you for what we've heard so far about these. I just wanted to ask a question about the One Somerset business case. We know that it's probably out of date now, because I think it dates back to 2020 and a lot of things have happened since then. But to what extent has the business case been or been able to be implemented and address the issues that we're facing today? I mean, I think it was projected an £18 million saving. Bearing in mind, we've got about £18 million overspend this year. That seems about it, really. So I just wondered, with the long tail effects of COVID and obviously inflation, is this business case going to deliver what it was meant to deliver, is what I'm asking.
Okay, I think Alan Jones is the best place to answer that one. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Wakefield, for the question. In essence, the business case to deliver the unitary proposal was still underway, and that was being delivered. So we've already gone through that process of delivering the initial contract savings that were envisaged as part of that, but also the senior management savings. And we were on track to continue to deliver the staffing savings related to the business case. However, it was clear in around September, October time last year that the business case, in terms of its approach and its scale of savings, needs to go deeper and be far more wide-ranging, given the scale of the budget issues that are presented to us. As a result of that, there is a need for a revised transformation programme in order to reflect the scale of the budget challenge and to go deeper and further than was anticipated within the business case, probably a pace that also wasn't envisaged, in order to ensure that the council continues to be sustainable. So in summary, we were on track to deliver those savings. However, regrettably, we have had to go and redesign that programme in order to address the financial challenges that are in front of us. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor White.
Thank you. I was looking at page 64 of the appendix in reference to the number of children with SEN's position. And I was just reflecting that there has been considerable growth. And this is against a backdrop of a declining birth rate in Somerset. So the proportion of children now with SENs significantly increased beyond what we see as a percentage of our population. And I was just wondering whether these figures reflected the pressure which we're getting, particularly in Somerset, or is this really reflecting the national picture?
So thank you for the question. There is a context here, both nationally and a Somerset context. So historically, before 2014, when the regulations changed to move from statements to education and healthcare plans, Somerset was a very low provider of statements. We provided funding to schools without the statement process in place. When we moved to education and healthcare plans, we had a lot of catching up to do effectively in terms of moving from a non-statementing to a position where we would provide education and healthcare plans. We have, over that period of time in the last 10 years, increased the number of plans, and proportionally we have been below the national average until last year, when we met the national average and are now slightly above. when we've looked at the number of plans that we deliver and the type of needs that children have, we have an increasing number of children with social, emotional, and mental health issues in terms of plans. That is a national issue and is quite stark, I think, in Somerset at the moment. So we are in line, slightly above a national, but really in line with where the national picture is going. And we are providing the resources that those children need under the education healthcare plan system, whereas previously we wouldn't have done that in the old system, which shows is why you've got that really rapid rise and escalation of numbers of plans.
Thank you. That really helpful answer. It just seems to me that we're reflecting a pressure which we've inherited in terms of the production of the appropriate statements, and we're now catching up. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it exactly.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anything else from lead members or associate lead members, so just round the room for any other members of council. Not seeing any hands. And anybody online? I'm not seeing anybody online. Okay, so our recommendations are to note the forecast overspend of £18.3 million, 3.7% for the year, and the recovery action being taken and the mitigations put in place to address this. And B, to note the next report to be received by the Executive on revenue budget monitoring will be the month 9 report in February. Okay, do I see a proposer for that? Councillor Lysholm. Do I see a seconder for that? Councillor Wyke. Do I see those lead members in favour? Those lead members against? That's clearly carried. Which brings us on to item 7. And on item 7, we had 2 further public speakers, which were Alan Debenham and Nigel Bean. Alan, are you in the room or online? Can't see you in the room. Alan, are you online? Not seeing him online either. Nigel, are you here?
Yeah.
No, we'll take you first, Nigel, and then if Alan materialises, we'll take Alan next. If not, we'll read his question and the answer into the record. Okay, Nigel, please. Your 3 minutes starts now.
I'm not going to repeat some of the quotes out of the report, but I'll go just straight to question 1, really. Is the assumption, if DLUC agree to the request, that there will be no requirement to have a referendum for a council tax increase of 9.99%? And then further on, have no other alternative measures been considered to avoid issuing a 114 notice if the government department do not approve the requests for an additional 5% council tax increase and or a capitalisation direction, since 37.9 million is a relatively small amount in relation to the proposed draft budget of 637 million. And then further on, I mean, I do agree with paragraph 13 is widely recognised that the funding mechanism for local government is broken and needs urgent reform. And it's just interesting to note that Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole are facing possibly a 114 notice, as is Middlesbrough as well. And BCP went unitary about 5 years ago. So again, it's understood that it's not just Somerset. Anyway, moving on. Question 1C. Is it reasonable, brackets premature, question mark, to only focus on the unique value the authority can provide? That's a quote from the document. The vision, question mark, which seems to equate to less services and less jobs for the community of Somerset at a greater cost. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nigel. And it's Councillor Liz Lysholm to give the response. Liz.
Thank you, Chair. Nigel, I'll take your 3 questions in order. So question 1, that is correct. DLUC can agree to an increase above the referendum level, and they did this for Croydon, which was 15%, and 10% for Slough and Thurrock this year. They have already said that they will allow 10% for Slough, Thurrock and Woking for 24-25 in addition. That does not put Somerset in the same league of difficulty as those aforementioned councils. We are, in my opinion, one of the first councils to act in a timely way on a situation that is reaching many formerly very secure councils across the whole country. On the second question about alternative measures to avoid issuing a Section 114 notice, we have been forecasting a significant budget gap for 24-25 for some time. We have taken a range of actions to address this, as you'll know, including identification of £35.2 million worth of savings options, reviewing, challenging and reducing pressures, including by deep dives into both adults and children's, reviewing and reducing the capital programme, and reviewing and repurposing of £36.8 million of reserves. Despite all of that work, we still have a budget gap of 37.8 million for 24-25. Therefore, there are two options left to us if we are to avoid a Section 114 notice. They are additional council tax increase over and above the referendum limit and capitalisation direction. If a Section 114 notice were to be issued, then government commissioners would come into Somerset without local knowledge to work solely on the budget's bottom line, selling assets, putting up council tax, as we have seen in other councils. And we would have to pay very significant fees for commissioners. For example, in Birmingham, 8 commissioners have been appointed for 5 years. They are paid £1,100 to £1,200 per day each, plus expenses for up to 150 days per year. That is a very considerable amount of money. On your question 3, you ask if it is reasonable or premature to only focus on the unique value the authority can provide. So my answer is, well, I do believe that it is possible to create a sustainable council for Somerset. I share the concerns of those who fear loss of services that they really care about in places they frequent and love. Staffed by Somerset Council employees, often with many years of service and corporate knowledge. No councillor wishes to make those decisions. No one stands for election to make others unhappy. We all want to make a better difference. I will ensure, Nigel, that I include my introduction to item 7 in my written reply to you following this meeting. Thank you very much, as always, for your questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks.
Thank you, Nigel. And last call for Alan Debenham. Do we have a volunteer to read the question? Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you, Chair. So Alan's question is, bearing in mind the build-up to and now operation of our new Somerset Unitary Authority Council on the basis of pressure from ex-Conservative control because of so-called big savings and enhanced services, how is it, in public understandable language and sufficient detail, that the proposal for the present emergency budget with a council tax 10% increase and probable Section 114 insolvency warning application have come about?
Thank you, and Liz Lysholm.
Thank you. I don't think Alan is with us, but thank you, Alan, for your very good and timely question. So many people on parish and LCN meetings have asked me exactly the same question, as it feels the financial situation in Somerset has moved so far in such a short time. We know, of course, that we are not on our own in this situation. My short answer to you is that the business case for One Somerset was written in a different time. Might seem ridiculous when we're referring to under 4 years, from 2020 to early 2024. Yet a massive amount of financial change and pressure has impacted on the council in those years, and we now find that that real gap is 100 million approximately, where the business case was planned around savings of 18.5 million, as already raised as a question by my colleague, Councillor Sarah Wakefield. These are clearly very different figures, and I will address the reasons for the increased budget gap in my introduction to this item, and I will undertake to send to Alan Debenham my full introduction to this item along with this short answer following the meeting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And that concludes today's public questions. So we move on to the substantive of item 7. And can I ask Councillor Liz Lyshawn to introduce the item and highlight any key points?
Thank you again, Chair. Colleagues, we know that this council is facing a stark and challenging financial future. Forgive me, please, for a rather longer than usual introduction to this paper. We understand and acknowledge that this paper is extremely important in the life of this council. We also know that following the autumn statement and the financial settlement for local authorities last year, that the government is not listening. The funding available to councils has simply not kept pace with the costs of delivering services, and we face a budget gap of around 100 million for the next financial year. We are in an unprecedented position due to the rising costs faced by local authorities across the country, largely driven by those costs of social care. The council has to set a balanced budget, or government commissioners will do it for us, without local knowledge or indeed concern for the longer term of Somerset. They will consider the same actions and more. These are not things that we would ever wish to be considering, but the broken model of government funding for local government leaves us with no choice. This paper is our response to the situation in Somerset and needs to be read with understanding that we are one of many councils looking for solutions to a situation of growing challenge, complexity and sensitivity. The biggest factor in the marked increase in our budget gap is the full rebase of the adults budget, completed during the late summer of 2023, the first such rebase of adults budget for around 10 years. The previous fee structure of care home beds was low, and many factors have impacted on that cost, causing the weekly cost to rise by more than 45% and still rising. That situation was rightly predicted by the previous leader of council, with a panorama programme filmed in Somerset in 2019, making it absolutely clear how critical social care is to so many lives. In May 2019, the leader of this council said, and it's quoted on the BBC article, "The time bomb is ticking and it's getting louder." We are hearing it now. Since then, of course, COVID-19 has exacerbated our situation nationally, indeed globally. Inflation reached double figures, the highest for, I believe, 40 years. Interest rates reacted to the Liz Truss Airbnb booking of number 10 Downing Street, which was not even long enough for an assured short-hold tenancy agreement. Energy costs increased hugely following the invasion of Ukraine. The government COVID grants ended after 2 years of masking the low fee structure in this county. Mortgage rates and increasing rental prices are creating greater homelessness, and we know that Somerset has been particularly impacted by the need for nutrient neutrality, reducing new home building for years now. We have also seen increased pay awards, which we would welcome for all our officers, but at the same time, our income from council tax is limited to the referendum limit of 5%. So perhaps it should be no surprise that we have such a huge challenge, and that it is a challenge we are seeing right across the country. It is our responsibility to speak for Somerset and to be an early warning to the current government and indeed all political parties in the general election year. The increasing costs of social care now create a threat to the provision of services that are not statutory. These are often services and facilities that were previously the responsibility of the former district councils, many of which can fairly be called preventative services. Open spaces, sport and the arts, CCTV provision, community grants. These all help people of all ages live healthier, safer, more fulfilling lives in their own homes for longer. In addressing the One Somerset business case, I would say that on one hand, local government reorganisation has allowed savings that are sorely needed in Somerset, many in the back office. But the £18.5 million savings in 2020 are at an inadequate level for these changed times. The business case, not unreasonably, did not predict the causes of the current greater challenges. So we are considering today both the spreadsheet of pressures and the spreadsheet of savings that has already created huge concern, indeed outcry, and which will lead to this council having to take decisions that are fairly called painful and, to quote the leader of council, heartbreaking. I recall introducing the budget papers last February and saying that the identification of savings in the current financial year would make the following years more difficult. Regrettably, that prediction was also correct. So this is where we are now. We know that council tax does not work as a funding mechanism for social care. Where council tax income is lower, need is generally higher. Somerset has a low council tax base and a low council tax rate due to historic factors, much lower than geographical neighbours such as Dorset, where the 6-year council tax freeze was better understood as a detrimental factor in planning a medium-term financial strategy and plan. Somerset's situation identified in this paper is truly an early warning for government and for all political parties. We are looking at losing services we care about and believe we need in order to fund the statutory social care services. But I asked some further questions. I asked them of myself, but I asked them of this government and this country. What will happen when councils have made savings that take out all the non-statutory services and there is nothing left to cut? What will happen when a council's income is then no longer adequate to fund those social care services? That is not far away now. What will happen when the statutory override ends on the high needs block, where Somerset is facing a deficit of up to 45 million by the end of this financial year? And how can government believe it is sound financial management to tell us to keep that deficit separate, work on a recovery plan, when we know the money has already been spent and other councils are already borrowing to cover the cost of, for instance, Sen Transport? This is a very difficult future for local government and one that needs careful and considerate thought from politicians of all persuasions across the whole country. In this general election year, it will suit government, and it is already suiting the Prime Minister, to try to pin blame on non-conservative councils and on mismanagement of council budgets. But that is to wholly miss the point we make, that the current funding model for local authorities, for adult social care, for children's services, for housing and homelessness is broken and will fail completely within the next 2 years or so. Council tax does not work and it is failing the people who pay it. So while this is Somerset's problem to solve right now, we are hearing from other councils and local national organisations such as the Local Government Association, the County Councils Network, the District Councils Network. They are sharing our view that a national crisis is approaching for local authorities. This is a national problem. It requires a national solution. We must speak with one voice to look for a fairer funding mechanism so that we can continue to maximise opportunities in Somerset while taking care of those most in need of support. Chair, I would like to hand over now to our Executive Director for Resources and Corporate Services, our Section 151 Officer, Jason Vaughan. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll just add a few comments and just pull some things together from the report. So the report is set out on pages 99 to 136. It has 9 appendices on pages 137 to 177. The purpose of the report before you today is to update on the latest figures, including the update in respect of the provisional finance settlement from government, which we received just before Christmas. It is a basis of consultation with the Scrutiny Committee on the 1st of February, so you're not being asked to take any decisions today in terms of those things in the budget. In terms of the budget route, obviously, Scrutiny will meet on the 1st of February. Their comments will be fed back to you at your next meeting on the 7th of February. You will make draft budget proposals at that meeting, and they will be considered at council on the 20th of February. Just going to touch on a few things. So on the background context of the report on page 109, and just to add to some of the comments from Councillor Lyshon, it is extremely complex, driven by a lot of national issues that are impacting on Somerset. We are a new council that's only been in existence since April. We are in danger of running out of money. That is some quite unique circumstances and quite unique things happening on that. Just so pull out some of the key things. Inflation, you'll see on in the report, talks about inflation on chart 2 on page 110 illustrates this. 40-year high level of inflation, 11.1% by October 2022. Thankfully, inflation is dropping now, but that impact has impacted on all the council's budgets across the piece. You've seen that in the budget monitoring report you've had before you earlier today. If we move on to interest rates, chart 3 on page 111, in November 21, bank interest rates were at 0.1%. They're now at 5.25%. The council is a net borrower, and at the start of April of this year, it had the position of over £200 million on short-term interest rates. So every 1% has a £2 million negative impact. £2 million, 1%. If I move on to the sort of budget monitoring position, we've already covered that on the item earlier. We have seen the actions taken on by this council have a positive impact, with forecast overspend of £26.8 million in month 3 being reduced down to £18.3 million at month 7. In terms of the provisional finance settlement on page 114 and also set out in Appendix 3. Now, in terms of the finance settlement, I have to say I'm really disappointed in terms of the numbers Somerset's received. We're at the lower end of the spectrum across the piece. But actually, I was casting my mind back. Fair funding, phrase we often hear, that was promised as new funding mechanisms for councils in 2018. And every year I've heard it will be next year. It still hasn't arrived yet. The majority of funding now that you can see in those papers is actually coming through council tax and not grant from government. We saw grant cut between 2010 and 2020 by around 40%. If you look at the detail in the Appendix 3, you'll see the revenue support grant, new homes bonus, social care grant and service grant increasing from 57.4 million to 60.2 million. They've gone up by 5%. That is not enough to cover our cost increases. That is the basic problem, is our income is not going up as much as our costs are, and we don't have control over those items. If I move on to council tax on page 115 in the report, and also on Appendix 5, and then Appendix 5 will set out the trends in terms of council tax since it was first introduced in 1993. Table 4 shows the national average for a Band D council tax is £2,027. In Somerset, we are £381 below that national average. That has a massive impact on the income we receive, and it also has a massive impact on the adult social care precept as well. Chart 5 compares us to other unitary councils, and again, we are below the level there. So the provisional finance settlement is largely funded through council tax rather than government grant. The consultation actually runs out tonight at 1 minute to midnight, and I would encourage everybody to do a response on that. If I move on to the medium-term financial plan and the changes on chart 7 on page 120, this shows our direction of travel and how the numbers have moved over the last few months. We have been really clear in this council of setting out our position very early on, identifying the financial emergency and taking action around it. You'll see how that £100 million shortfall in November has reduced down to 37.9. Overall, actually, across the 3-year period that's forecast here, you'll see actually a reduction of £46 million from £183.3 million to £137.3 million. That's a 25% reduction by the work that's been done so far. In terms of changes to the budget, on page 122, we've summarised the changes across individual services in table 7. We have the pressures then on summarise the changes in table 6 with the pressures on table 7 and the savings on tables 8 and 9. In terms of those savings, we need to be really clear on the basis which they've been put forward. These are not members' options. These have been come forward from officers on the basis of trying to avoid a section 114, identifying any savings that could be delivered for the next financial year. These aren't savings we like, they aren't savings you like, but they are savings that we could deliver for the next financial year. That's the basis of which we put them forward. Go back to those pressures, and when you look at the adults figures in particular, the driver, they're a big cost in. You think, how's that happening? Well, actually, if you look at one of the key factors in there for our care providers is the national living wage. In April 22, it went up by 6.6%, April 23 by 9.7%, and for April 24 by 9.8%. Those care providers absolutely deserve that living wage increase. Unfortunately, when you compare that to the funding we receive, and I've been talking about 10% increases there pretty much, we're getting 5%. That's why you have a problem. Costs going up, double the rate of funding you get. That's the heart of the matter. Appendix 4 to the budget report brings together both those cost pressures and those savings across the individual services and provides that whole picture on a service by service basis. If I move on to page 126 and talk about reserves, we've reported this previously. We have increased general reserves to £49.8 million, taking account of the in-year overspend and ensuring they stay above our minimum level. We have identified £36.8 million worth of reserves that can be repurposed to support the budget. I have to say that is a sticking plaster over the issue. It buys us time. It doesn't give an ongoing solution, but it's a key part of the package of the budget proposals. The high needs block and DSG in table 10 and the forecasts around those are quite frightening in terms of tomorrow's problem. We have a statutory override in place that says we don't need to take account of that deficit. That will not disappear. That is money that council has already spent. That is forecast to get close to £100 million over that period. That is a significant impact on the council's finances. And don't forget, we're funding that. So £100 million at say 5% interest, that is costing our council taxpayers £5 million a year just to service that debt. There needs to be a national solution to that. I'm afraid it's just not emerging at the moment. Page 132, in terms of conversations with DLUC, we have had 3 meetings with DLUC so far. We have made an application for a capitalisation direction. Part of that is taking up an application for additional 5% on council tax. That would be an extra £1.58 per week, but would deliver £17.1 million worth of ongoing savings. On page 132, we set out the consultation and engagement process. That is live at the moment, both with public and with business, and closes on the 22nd of January. And we have encouraged everybody to take that opportunity and to feedback through that process. On page 132, we set out some of the next steps and timetable in finalising the budget proposals. There's still quite a bit of work still to be done, but I think today we can see the kind of shape of the budget. So if I move back to the summary on page 101, because I think this helps to bring all of that together, you'll see there's 2 tables in the report. Table 1 shows the changes from the 23-24 budget to where we are now. So the updated gap is £82.5 million. That's how the £100 million has been reduced. You will then see there's a use of reserves and some other once-off items, collection fund, surpluses for both council tax and business rate, brings us down to a remaining gap of £37.9 million. Table 2 shows how that can be closed through the capitalisation direction and additional council tax request. So that is our current position. This report summarises that. I must emphasise again, today is not the final budget proposals. They come on the 20th of February. Happy to take any questions or clarify any points.
Thank you, Liz. And thank you, Jason. And first of all, looking for questions from lead members or associate lead members. Councillor Patrick. Good morning, Ollie.
Good morning. Thank you very much. 2 questions from me, really, but I'm going to try and roll them into one. I was quite surprised on table 2, which in my pack is different. I think you're looking. You must have the whole pack with hundreds of pages in it. I'm looking online, and the numbering is slightly different. But this is the table for which explains the provisional finance settlement for Somerset. I was quite alarmed on a few things, really, on that table. Number 1 being the Rural Services Delivery Grant. I'd quite like to know why that's been kept flat. Why is that not going up at all? And the other thing, which is quite unprecedented, is why is the services grant being cut by 84%? I just wondered if that could be explained in more detail, please.
Yeah, so you're referring to Appendix 3, which details the provisional finance settlement. Yes, in terms of the service grant, it's a really good question, one of which every chief finance officer up and down the country was asking DLUC exactly the same question, because none of us were expecting that to that level. We were expecting some minor reductions, not that sort of reduction. So I don't know is the honest answer. This is all from DLUC. It's how they do the formula, how they switch money round the system. Like I say, the overall settlement I think is really disappointing for Somerset. The average across the country is 6.5% increase. Ours is 6.1. They sound quite good headline figures, but remember the majority of that is from council tax, not from government funding through grants.
Did you want to come back?
Yes, just to say, firstly, thank you. Secondly, what's your view on the Rural Services Delivery Grant? I mean, I think that seems pretty important to us, given how much rurality we have in Somerset and how big we are as a county and how new we are as an authority. I was just really very surprised to see the government not recognising that in this finance settlement.
I think that comes back to my point of the income the council receives not keeping pace with the costs. You know, we've seen inflation over the year, peak at a 40-year high, and yet the funding through that particular grant stays level. That is a real terms reduction. You can't dress it up any other way.
Thank you very much.
Elisha, I think you want to come in, Liz?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that that table 1, which in the whole pack is on a page 143, is really helpful in understanding what the core spending power of a council is, because it was reported in the press where you would actually expect people to know better as government grants, the core spending power. You can look down that list and you can see that most of the money is generated within Somerset. It is Somerset residents and businesses' money. It is not all government grants. Indeed, the government grants are a minority part of the core spending power. But where it is presented by government as increased core spending power, that in my view is misleading. Thank you.
Thank you. And secondly, I've got Councillor Roswell. Ros.
Thank you. I just want to touch on the situation we're in now, and perhaps the one title officer would like to talk about this level of pressure. We've inherited a very low council tax base. The number of properties in A, B and C in Somerset is significantly more than many areas. In fact, the national comparator of D is probably not particularly relevant to us. And so with that, and with Councillor Elation's comment that where there is a low council tax base, then the likelihood of greater need is there. And then alongside it, we have a very low council tax. So much so, I think it's really in the bottom 4 or 5 in the country or whatever. And I just wondered if you overlaid one over the other, then surely the decision we inherited of 6 years council tax freeze was strategically a very difficult management decision, which has had huge impact on us and our inherited position. And I wondered whether or not that is really taken into account by government or anybody else when considering our finances going forward. I know that you've been active in conversations with DLUC.
Yeah, thank you. In terms of council tax, I think nationally the LGA has been campaigning for quite a few years to say, actually, this should be set locally, controlled locally, decisions for local councillors, not subject to government control. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. And it's a shame we have these mechanisms that are in place. You're right in terms of Somerset. You know, it's set out in the section on the council tax on page 115. 64.5% of our residents are in A2C properties. So Band D isn't a great comparison in terms of what people actually pay. They pay less than that. The impact of the council tax freeze, not increasing them during that period from 2010 to sort of 2016, has had a massive impact on paragraph 60 there at the bottom of page 115. You'll see I've estimated that it's around, but it's over £50 million per annum impact that has on us now. That would be in our base budget. So you start to see we have a budget gap of £37.9 million, Actually, if we had another £50 million income, we'd be talking about growth in our budget, not reductions, in quite the same way. So those decisions that were taken across, all of the councils, and you can see that in the trends, in Appendix 4, shows that it does have a longer term impact and impacts on where we are now.
Thank you. And if we just don't look at it in 1 year, but look at it over the last years, what has been the collective impact on Somerset in failure to collect the original 6 years and then the cumulative impact since then?
It's a very good question of which I haven't got the precise answer, but it's hundreds of millions of pounds of income that the council would have had.
So quite a significant, if I can put words into your mouth, pressure for this council and for the residents of Somerset. This is why we are having to make these very difficult decisions, because we've inherited this, I would say, horrendous pressure of failing to actually tax according to the national system for 6 years.
You can see a loss of £50 million to the base each year going back to 2010 has a significant impact on the funding that would be available. I think when you also combine that with how the government grants have worked, and we've seen the reductions there as well, that is a double whammy for the council. So the bit you can control in terms of council tax, even though it's limited, hasn't gone up as much, but the government grants have also reduced over those periods of time as well.
And Liz?
I just wanted to give the government a good idea, if they might like to listen. If they wanted to do something in the short term, they could return to funding the council tax reduction scheme, which in Somerset is costing somewhere in the region of 37 million a year. Part of that is mandated by government for those of state pension age. The rest is for working age, and that is the decision that we took at the recent full council. Yes. Government could do that. Government could allow more local decision making, not just on council tax, but also on such things as planning fees and licensing. There are things a government could do. They could be doing them already. They are not. It is their decision. It's also government's decision to tell councils to use reserves and to sell assets. Those are all probably things that we would think are not the best financial management, but we know this is a general election year. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Sarah, Councillor Wakefield.
Sarah,
Sarah, sorry.
Sorry. Yes, I think this is really following on from what you've just been saying, really. Quite a lot of councils are warning that they've got problems going forwards with their finances. And the LGA magazine talks about financial strain this month again and says local services face further cuts. Other unitaries have already, I gather, new unitaries have already got capitalisation directions. I don't know if Jason can confirm that. But really my question is, listening to all this, what freedom of action do we actually have in addressing the projected shortfall?
We don't have much freedom in Somerset. We have to go to government for these big decisions that will give us a solution for Somerset Council, and then to give us the time to build a sustainable council. So I wrote the letters to the Minister for Local Government, Simon Hoare MP, and to the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, Laura Trott MP, last year, exploring all the options with regard to setting council tax above the referendum limit. So those letters have been received, they're acknowledged, they are playing into the whole situation in DLUC. So we're talking of working with DLUC, with Treasury, and in Somerset, we're looking at inward investment. We're also working with I'm not sure what the department's called now, business. So we're looking to government to do what we also need to do, which is to work across directorates and find solutions that work and that actually enable decision making to come out of the centre. This is my view, probably not theirs, but to come out of the centre, be more localised and allow councils such as Somerset Council to do its best financial management within extraordinarily challenging years. Because this is not a one-year challenge. This is a challenge that will take us 2 and 3 years to look for that sustainable future. Thank you.
Thank you. Did we have confirmation that other unitary councils have had capitalisation directions?
Yeah, so they're published on the government's website. We saw the 2 new Cumbrian councils were awarded them for the current financial year. There are a range of other councils that have received them across the piece. What I would say is that they aren't a panacea. They just, again, buy you some time. In terms of what have we done, I suppose I'd refer you to the kind of budget report itself, in terms of we started at £100 million a few months ago. We're down to 37.9. That's quite a long way of progress. The issue is we can't solve the final part without help from government at this stage.
Okay, and Councillor Darch, Dixie.
Thank you, Leader. My question is about the high needs block, which I think is such alarming news, and it doesn't impact on the budget in a way that we're discussing here, but it's kind of a massive tidal wave on the horizon. It clearly affects other councils as well. So my question is, are we uniting with other councils to lobby hard on this one? And is there any indication from ministers that this debt would be kind of written off, because it's untenable, really? Thank you.
Okay, so we are part of a group of local authorities that are in the bottom 40 for education funding across the country. And that group does lobby government quite hard in relation to that funding package, and also in relation to the SEND funding, because it's part of the overall education funding. So yes, we are part of that, and we have been liaising with local MPs around that too. In relation to central government's view of the high needs block overspend, which is a national issue, I don't believe, unless Jason can tell me anything different, that there has been any indication about what the government intend to do about that.
If I can just add to that. So we are part of a Delivering Better Value and SEND programme. There is a safety valve programme, which is for the councils that got even bigger deficits, frankly. Ours apparently isn't considered big enough to be in there at the moment, which kind of gives you a bit of a flavour of the national picture. This statutory override that runs till the end of 25-26, remember, was supposed to end, then the last year was extended for 3 years, recognising the problems across the country. So it is recognised there is a massive problem. There just is not an easy solution to this one.
Okay, Adam.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. One of them is on if one of these officers propose savings, if they are working with partners, for example, town councils and other groups, when will they come off the list? Because my concern very much is that if we're trying to work with partners to take these services on, for example, Mudford Rec, that isn't going to be done in time in April. That is not going to be delivered in that amount of time, because there's a lot of legal work to do, a lot of legal agreements to do, and a lot of information to sort out. So my concern is we're saying we're going to work with partners to get these assets transferred, but we're not going to be able to deliver that, I wouldn't think, realistically, in the timescale. So when will that be able to come off the list to keep those services going so they won't be shut at that time? That's my first question. Do you want to answer that one first?
Shall we take that one first?
Yeah.
Who's, well, first of all, we're, as I said earlier, we're open to any and all conversations with partners in the city, town, parish sector, other parts of the public sector, the private sector, education. Anybody who wants to talk to us will. If a conversation is ongoing and is realistically going to produce an outcome, then we can work on a case by case basis as to looking at what the timescales are. I think we're quite happy to look at moving things into a subsequent financial year if we think we can keep the service and deliver it with the financial keep the saving in the long term. The issue comes if we can't, and then I don't want to raise anyone's expectations that anything here will be easy. I don't know whether Duncan wants to add to that one.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a technical point, the savings wouldn't come off the list because this council would still be looking to make the savings. The question is, as the leader's just alluded to, at what point does the savings start? When is the timing of it? So if we're in very good quality discussions and it looks like there's some future of that discussion to protect assets and services, then what we'd be recommending is that we look at moving the point at which the council anticipates taking the saving further ahead to allow all of the work you just outlined to happen. But the council will still need to be taking that saving in its books. Otherwise, again, we fall back into not being able to balance.
Thanks for that, Duncan. That's obviously if councillors obviously agree, because as I said, this is officers' savings at this present point. It's certainly not my saving. And on that point then, so are you saying, to just answer the question on that one, are you saying that then, for example, a certain saving, if we are looking at working to transfer these assets over, that could move to the following year's budget? Is that how I'm reading that?
Through you, Leader, it could move to whatever point's appropriate. So if there's a conversation that says in a 4 weeks period that can be resolved, then we can look at moving it 4 weeks. If it needs more time, it would be led by the conversation. What I would say is that would have to be on the clear understanding if members have made that decision, that if at any point the process didn't continue or started to look like it wasn't going to happen, we may well need to go back to the original plan.
Yeah, that's understandable. So my second point on, and this one is relating to the Mudford Rec line, is have we looked and have we got the figures of how much it would cost us to actually have this saving? Because I've seen the published figures and I don't think that's realistically right, because if that was to shut, there is money which would have to be paid back to grants. And there's also my second question on that. When I was a South Somerset District Councillor, I understand there was a sinking fund for replacing the track at some point in time. I just wondered if that budget line still exists. You don't need to tell me how much it is today. I just need to know whether that budget line still exists somewhere, because I've been asked this question quite a few times, and it would be good to sort of know that if possible. And my final question is, I actually think if we can do a deal with the town council and community groups, that will be good for securing the future, because actually it can be run for Yeovil people by Yeovil people. And if this council ever in the future, under any political party, has a section 114, at least this service would be saved for the future of Somerset. So I ask officers to work, and I thank officers for how tirelessly you are working, but I ask you, please proceed to work with the town council in Yeovil and the groups in Yeovil to save this asset. Because if you look at the sheer volume of people who've signed a petition, I've never in my political career in this area ever seen a strong feeling on such a service. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Can I go to Chris Ball first and then Liz Lowsham?
Yes, thank you. So just to confirm, we are in detailed negotiations with Yeovil Town Council. They're continuing even this morning. There was another meeting to try and establish exactly what the package of assets and services looks like from Yeovil Town Council's perspective. And in terms of the clawback and or the potential for a financial clawback, the period for the England Hockey grant has expired. So there's no clawback capability from England Hockey on the money that they put in regards to pitch closures. We're still trying to establish exactly what the arrangements were from Sport England. So we're still working through the detail of those, but again, they may have expired. We're just trying to work through those. So we'll have to give you a separate answer on those. And in return to the sinking fund, it appears, because we can find no line entry in our budget, it appears that that is an item that was taken in anticipation of vesting day. So we don't believe that Somerset Council has a sinking budget reserved for that facility.
Thank you very much for the answer.
Okay, and just come across to Liz as well.
I just wanted to make 2 points. One is that that land is protected by Fields in Trust, where we did the same thing at Tor Leisure in Glastonbury. That is in perpetuity. It dates from, I think, 1930. That is the best protection for land, for leisure and sport, and to keep it away from building. So it is in a good place there. That does, though, have restrictions. And these are the kinds of details that we're all looking at, because where we were looking at Fields in Trust in Glastonbury, you couldn't charge for admission, and that makes quite a difference to any business case. I was going to say something else, Chair, that I've now completely forgotten. I think it was about the DLUC and the review of reserves, where DLUC will be looking at all of our reserves as one of their actions in deciding how they kind of treat Somerset. And if we have reserves in there that don't have an immediate need, so within the next 2 financial years, then there will be an expectation that those reserves would be repurposed. And I think that is what's causing the confusion with what my colleague refers to as a sinking fund. All of these things are being explored. Of course, don't forget, it's not just for Mudford Rec. We're looking at all of these things. We are looking right across the whole county. And there are always greater complexities. And my view is now that there are often very good reasons why assets belong to councils and why they have a better future within a council, whether it's a town council, formerly a district, or a county council. There are often very good reasons for them sitting within a council. Thank you.
Okay, just pass on to Duncan for one final point on this.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. I just wanted to make one point around all of the proposals. The proposal for Mudford Rec being a really good example. It is not about closing it. It's about the council can no longer afford to subsidise it. So we want to see in all of these cases that these services are protected as best we can if there are local partners and local people who can take them on. So I just want to clarify, it's not the council's proposal, it should be closed. It's the council's proposal, we can no longer afford to subsidise it. And that's a conversation we're trying to have with lots and lots of local partners right now.
Okay, I've got Heather next.
Thank you. My list of questions has got quite a lot shorter now because the last couple of points made were I was going to make a question about, but the other one I had was actually going to the recommendations, which is in the number C on the recommend. I'm not trying to move the recommendations, but something mentioned in the recommendations and in the report is around the work that has to be done on the resizing for the council going forward. I think this report's been really good at pointing out all of the things that we have to do in order to get to that balanced budget on the 20th of February. But then the resizing is something which would take place probably from the 21st of February. And I realised that the recommendation is saying that a report's coming to us on the 7th. That's not very far off. So I just wanted some assurance around how full that might be by the time we get to it on the 7th.
Thank you, Heather. That was pretty much word for word my question. So the business case for sustainable Somerset, when will we see it?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the question. In terms of developing the proposal, we set out in this report the steps that have been taken since December to develop that even further, set out the establishment of some of the characteristics that will be required and the key steps within that programme. We've also outlined the what I would describe as pillars within that programme, because clearly it's not just a case of right-sizing the organisation. We know that a number of transformation programmes have failed in previous history. So what we want to do is make sure that we have a clear understanding of each element of that programme. For example, that includes right sizing and understanding how we can be a leaner, more flexible and more agile council, but also then starting to understand those key activities and the service areas that will be a priority to you as members and as an executive. And then also those areas that we want to focus on in terms of asset and service devolution in particular, and working with our partners, not only in the city, town and parish council sector, but also in colleagues in health. All of those key components build into a clear programme. Our intention is to bring back the scope of that to your meeting in February, so you have something to approve and have assurance that it is developing in the right track. But clearly it will be a longer term programme. Its detail will emerge over the weeks and months after the budget is set, because it's part of understanding how we create a sustainable council into 25, 26 and beyond. But we'll clearly need to have those proposals in place and developed immediately after the budget is set, in order to ensure that we have that clear budget round. So in essence, first step is to have in February a clear understanding of what will be those core components, the likely costs and the likely steps, and then to follow that a very detailed implementation plan of the steps we will take as an organisation to achieve that.
And Jason, would like to come in.
Just to add to that as well, need to be really clear in the budget proposals before you today. We don't include any savings from that. We do have the original LGR business case savings still built into the budget. We haven't built in any savings from this programme at all. That's a deliberate thing until we can work up and actually set out to you, here's the implementation costs, here's the ongoing savings that you would get out of that, and that work is ongoing.
Thank you, and apologies, Chair, for stealing your question.
That's all right. You make up for it with biscuits. Tom.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to start by just echoing the sentiments that lots of people have had around the room today around that, there are really heartbreaking decisions ahead. And I think, as Councillor Lyshan rightly said, none of us are sat around this table to be making these kinds of decisions. And it really is heartbreaking. I think we all know that what we're really seeing today is the effect of a chronic lack of investment in our public services, not only in Somerset, but across our country. We all hear stories of our police being stretched and courts having backlogs, our NHS being overworked and understaffed, our schools crumbling and lacking resources. And I think what we're really starting to see now in harsh reality is the impact of that lack of investment is having on local government and on local councils. And it really is saddening. And we know that particularly the impact, as we've heard, of cost to provide social care to our most vulnerable is really driving that. And we obviously need a national solution to the crisis. I do find it rather unfortunate, as Jason Vaughan said, that your government had a chance to provide some funding to us here in Somerset and not only chose not to take it, but actually give us less than our neighbours. I just find that utterly shocking, given our transparency and how open we've been to government about the challenges that we're facing here in Somerset. Now in Taunton Town Council, which I lead, we've had positive conversations with Somerset Council, and we're willing to do our bit as a town council to step up and continue to provide some of those really important services that may not be able to be provided by Somerset Council in the future. I think one of the most complex ones on the list is CCTV and the provision of that service. So I just had a couple of questions on CCTV, if that's okay. So I just wanted to ask what partnership models are currently being considered. What consultation, if any, we're looking to undertake as a council on that, and how we can look to ensure there's no loss of service whilst we find an appropriate route forward. Thank you.
Thank you. So we are able to review alternative models of operation, but the budget proposal put forward is a cessation of the service. Excuse me. So those alternative operating models would require us to receive income from external sources. So potentially the Police Crime Commissioner, potentially city, town or parish councils. I think it's difficult to envisage a situation where one city, town or parish would take on the entirety of running that service. It's complex, it's centralised. It's mainly its operating costs in terms of the monitoring. So it's difficult to envisage a situation where one city, town or parish would come forward and bear the cost of that. However, we are working out the cost on average per camera, and therefore we can have negotiations with city, town and parish councils in regards to any contribution they might want to make. In order to retain the service as is, everybody would have to pay, and it's a fairly substantial amount of money. However, if enough come forward, and offer us financial contributions, we could look at altering the monitoring model. So we could look at prioritised periods of time. We could even look at recording and not monitoring, and only therefore accessing the data at the point of request by the police. So there are other models available, but they are dependent upon other external funding at this stage. In terms of consultation, we will need to undertake a specific consultation to cease that service. That will need to be with our partners and potentially with the public as well. And in terms of the costs, or rather, sorry, let me rephrase that. Clearly, it's for members to make a decision on the option put forward. Any deviation from the option put forward, there will be a cost consequence to the council of doing so. Clearly, if there are a number of external financial sources available to us, we might want to, as described by Duncan earlier, review the staging and the timing that service change happens. But as it stands at the moment, the assumption is it is for the 1st of April, and that saving would be a cessation of that service.
Okay, thank you for that very clear answer. And as with all of these, if we can work with partners and any other bodies in the community, the voluntary sector, to be able to continue services, we are very open to those conversations going forwards. I've got Ollie wants to come back.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question is on rubbish. Before I get to it, I just wanted to quickly, refer to Appendix 7. Appendix 7 is about the pressures on this council. I think as the conversation is veering towards discussing the savings, I think we all need to be aware of the pressures too. And that relates to my question, because one of the pressures on this council has been imposed on us by central government, which is the changes to removing charges for DIY materials. The pressure on this council is nearly £500,000. My question is, in relation to one of the proposed savings in front of us, which in large part seems to me to be driven by those cost pressures, and it's the proposal to close 5 household waste recycling sites or centres. And I wondered if we had any detail as to which 5 those sites, which of those sites are up for consideration, please.
Councillor Dodge.
Thank you, Ollie. Yes, there has been a lot of interest in the savings around potential closure of recycling centres, and there's no surprise because it's a particularly unpalatable option and clearly not one that I would be wanting to do under normal circumstances. So we've now had conversations with potentially affected staff at some of the centres, and we can give a bit more detail. The aim is to save in the area of 900,000 from the recycling site network and to try and limit the impact of any closures as much as we can. Our sites are run by contractors, and any change means complex commercial negotiations. To identify sites that would give us the greatest savings and the less impact, if you like, officers have calculated savings on the basis of cost per visitor to each of the sites and the cost per tonne of material deposited. So the 5 sites at risk on that calculation are Castle Cary, Cheddar, Crewkerne, Dulverton and Willerton. This could change. We're still looking for ways of saving money on our waste contracts, but as Ollie has mentioned, we also have pressures, and officers are involved in complex commercial negotiations in the coming weeks. If this proposal is taken forward like others, there would be further consultation before any decision was implemented. And I'd quite like to pick up on the cost pressures. We are hit by cost pressures in waste. So one of those is contract inflation, that our contracts are index linked. So that's fair enough. The contractors have to take that rise in costs. We have to, what we pay them reflects that, but inflation is hitting us really hard. And then the legislation that Ollie was referring to, we used to charge for some DIY materials at our recycling centres, and the government have recently introduced insulation legislation to prevent us from doing that. So asbestos, plasterboard and rubble are the things that we can no longer charge for. And I think that the rationale for that was to reduce fly tipping, that's kind of sounds logical enough. It's quite hard to identify who the culprits are with fly tipping if you don't catch them. But our intelligence suggests that it's rarely DIY, people doing DIY on their houses. It's more likely to be rogue traders. So the impact of that legislation with no money to support us implementing it is about 458,000. So that is kind of fueling the need for us to find other unpalatable savings. Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Ollie, and thanks for that answer, Dixie. Just to stress, that isn't a final and definitive list. These are still at this stage options that we still have to do some more work on. We are at pains to be trying to do the transparency on all of these difficult choices that we have to make, because only through that transparency can we have those conversations with our communities. Dave Wone.
Thank you, Chair. We're pretty good, just following on from that, we're pretty good at recycling in Somerset. I recall during a June 2022 visit to Evercreech, when Mickey Green was the site director there, I think at that time, he explained to me that something like only 5% of our waste goes into landfill. So we're pretty diligent in Somerset. So my question is, if recycling centres are closed, where do the public take that waste that they would have taken to a recycling centre?
Again, just to reiterate the leader's point that no decisions have been made, these are proposals that we have asked officers to come up with. So we're still kind of working in the realms of the hypothetical, but those named sites which aren't definite in any way, the kind of factor of proximity has also been taken into account. So looking at the kind of the geographical spread of where recycling centres and how close it is to get to the next nearest one. Thank you.
Thank you. Briefly, Ollie.
I just wanted to try and cheer people up, if I may, Chair, with a bit of good news on rubbish, which is that I think we ought to be proud of what we've achieved in Somerset with our recycling rate. We're currently ranked number 28 out of, I think, 335 local authorities. So we need to keep our targets high, but also be, I think, quite happy with where we are. We're doing very good work in rubbish.
Yeah, and Recycle More has been particularly impressive in improving our rates as well. But thank you for cheering us up. I think it was perhaps a forlorn hope today. Councillor Wilkins.
Yeah, on the number of recycling sites, taking 5 off will reduce us down to 11. Is that right? What is the statutory amount this council this size is required to have?
The kind of the statement in the statutory level is quite vague. It just refers to a requirement for us to have recycling centres, plural. So you could interpret that as 2. That is clearly insufficient for a county the size of Somerset. So it's not very clear, really.
The delivery grant earlier, and this is particularly an area which impacts rurality. You know, very conscious that on that list there's 2 West Somerset sites, and West Somerset is the most rural of our areas, so it's particularly difficult when we don't get the support for providing services in rural areas, yet we're expected to do it regardless. Anyway, I'm not seeing any other leader associate lead members, so I'll come on to other members, and Claire Sally first.
Thank you very much. So within the options presented for savings, I can see the RNLI, which is to cancel the contracts for lifeguards on Burnham-on-Sea, Barrow and Bream. And the process has, that's already been mentioned, shown the importance of working with our partners, listening to our communities, because you've been open and transparent. Losing lifeguard coverage in those areas has raised considerable concern locally, and it affects the perception of visitors and tourism. So I've worked with local councillors and those involved in the lifeguard coverage and made exec aware of this and sent a proposal through where you make the savings but keep the coverage. And I asked for consideration of that proposal, which I know I will have. And just to say, I'll offer my assistance sort of going forward. So I bring it today really as reassurance to those who are concerned about cutting the RNLI in those areas. So this is just a quick like to say, please consider the proposal, and you know, thank you for encouraging me to talk to the partners and the community about this option. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Your email received this morning safe and well, and will be passed on to the relevant officers. Don't know whether Mr. Chris Hall would like to come in now.
I was just going to say thank you for the work undertaken so far. We have received it. We'll pick that up directly, but thank you very much.
Thank you. And you know, as with many of these, it is around, can we do the same thing but without the money, which is such a difficult position. However, it is the challenge that we face. Next, we're online, and we've got Mandy. Hello, Mandy Chilcott. Are you receiving? Hello, Mandy.
Here. Hi. So I'm not with you. Awful cold bill. I didn't think you'd want it passed on, which is why I'm not in the room. Not in the room today. So we've heard a lot this morning about the situation and finance for local government. The challenge facing us, of course, is you are listening today as an executive to the idea of how you can possibly balance the budget, which is this council's remit. So first of all, just some clarity. So we've got about 100 million shortfall. Most of that seems to be coming in the form of capitalisation and use of reserves and use of council and business rate fund surpluses, all of which are one-offs. So my question is, within the paper, it says on page 101, if DLUC do not grant either dispensation request, the council will not be able to balance a 24-25 budget, and this situation will force the section 151 officer to use his statutory powers to issue a section 114 notice. When will we know whether that's going to be the case, please? That's my first question.
That sounds like it's a question for the section 151 officer, really.
Yeah, it's a really good question. In terms of definitive timetables from DLUC, I don't have them as such. There is a slight however. In terms of any request in terms of council tax will be confirmed as part of the final local government finance settlement. We're expecting that early February, potentially the 5th of February. So we'd hear about that before the next executive meeting on the 7th. In terms of a capitalisation direction request as a whole, DLUC are likely to send me a, inverted commas, a letter of comfort at some stage, confirming that we are in active discussions with them. They would not actually have confirmed any capitalisation direction by the time we come to set our budget in February. If you look at the pattern of them, because of the time they take, they actually come in March usually, but they would have to provide me with something for that council meeting on the 20th of February so that I wasn't forced to use my statutory powers.
Thank you. So just to be clear, if you haven't had something that's very clear, you still might be in 114 territory.
Yeah, at this stage, the council isn't able to balance the budget itself, and therefore I would be forced to issue that section 114 notice.
Thank you for the clarity, because we've heard a lot about hopefully not going there today as opposed to being there. My second question's around, we've heard lots of questions from the public today about areas of understandable concern and cuts to local services that really matter to them. I think we've heard that today. For me, there's a lack of clarity in the papers about often who will be affected. And certainly the impacts on staff and potential job losses. So my first question, and I'll add another one to it, is, do we know potentially how many jobs are at risk within these savings? In previous years, it's always been quite clear. I couldn't really find any reference to that in the papers. And the secondly was to follow up on a similar vein. There have been lots of conversations with town, parish and city councils. And I think some of them, where they are able, are looking to support the council to retain services that are important. I would say that many, for budget setting, have been totally blind on what they can assist with, how much their contribution would need to be to keep services going. So my question is, when will those conversations take place? I know some have started, and if there is a huge lag, that will presumably, if anything after the 1st of April, will reduce a potential saving. If you're sitting on it, will that be reflected in the budget monitoring? So that's the next question. Thank you.
There was such competition to answer the first question. I think Liz, did you want to go first?
Yeah, I just wanted to refer to the equality impact assessments that will be coming forward, of course, and your point about job losses. Of course, that will depend on services, how they're managed in the future, whether TUPE applies, of course. And your point about city, town, parish councils and these questions I've also heard at LCN meetings. My personal view from my working days is that if the bigger towns and cities and parishes, because Street's still a parish, are actually precepting in a way that they know they need to in order to protect their local services, the smaller parishes where they have much smaller precepts, although they have access to the facilities and the services of the bigger towns that they visit, the smaller parishes, it's less urgent. And I've heard from many smaller parishes with tiny precepts who don't wish to go up at all. And then I've heard from towns where they are ambitious and capable and planning for the future really well. And some of them I know have been planning already for a year or even 2 years. So I don't think we're giving those bigger parish and town councils enough, and city, sorry, Theo, enough credit for the work that they have already been doing over the last 2 years. I think plenty of people have seen this coming. The challenges through COVID and all the rest of it have probably just brought that into focus a bit more for them. And I completely understand that those on the smaller parishes may not even want to address it next year either. My view is that as long as the bigger councils of the most local councils do address it, that actually we will find ways to work in partnership. Thank you.
The other thing I was going to add is in terms of that timetable piece, in terms of those equality impact assessments, they'll be ready for the 1st of February scrutiny committee. So the details will be part of those papers.
Thank you.
Yes, just to add one last point, the timing for the budget does need to be right sized to be full year effects. Obviously, right now the savings proposals are on the assumption of full year. We can't do that until executive decide what proposals they want to put forward to council in February, which is why the section 25 statement is timed to be after we know what the executive proposals are. At this point in time, this is a list of potential options. It's not the executive's proposals. So until we have that, we can't take that decision on the section 12. Sorry, Jason can't take that decision on the section 25 report about the adequacy of the budget proposals.
Thank you. That full year effect's a concern because the minute you start working with others to try and find solutions, we all know that's time consuming and you're immediately losing a full year effect. So it will impact further. My last question really is about resilience and capacity. So we've heard a lot about asset transfers to towns and parishes. There's a huge piece of work around the sale of assets. And then we've got now a resizing business case. So my question is, do you have assurance that this council has the capacity and the time to, first of all, undertake a resizing in good time, and secondly, in undertaking that, to carry out the other important pieces of work that will need to be carried out to meet this budget? Thank you.
I'm looking from, it's like I'm watching Wimbledon here. Duncan, are you taking this one?
That's all right. Thank you. We can't give an assurance about the overall size. The strategy we follow for the budget setting is very, very clear. We can't close the gap with officer proposals for the budget setting in February. Therefore, what we've been working very hard to do, as we've said throughout the whole of this year, is find as much as we can in terms of savings proposals to close the gap, whilst finding a mechanism to enable the council to set a balanced budget for next year. What that will mean effectively is moving, if I can use a phrase, a structural deficit into the financial year afterwards. So the strategy we've got is to allow us to use next year to close that gap. So by the time you're setting the budget in February 25, hopefully we will close as much of that gap as we can, because we'll have had 12 months to do so. The reshaping of the council is part of that, but it's not within the budget setting. So you will not be approving savings because of a reshaping of the council in February this year. You will be approving them in February the year after, or at some point before, if they're ready before that point. But I don't know if Mr. Jones wants to add anything to that, Leader, if that's okay.
Thank you. And through you, Chair, in essence, we are scoping that programme in order to understand its scope and its scale. If we just look alone at the level of interest in asset and service devolution, we've had a significant level of response to the leader's letter of last year, around 120 responses, all of which expressing an interest in taking those services on, or at least starting that dialogue. It's clear that we need to understand where those specific areas are, and then how do we then orientate those services to engage with them in the right way. But I'm pleased to say that the larger towns that are engaging are having positive conversations. So around 16 individual conversations are already going on, and those discussions are utilising utilising the existing resource and then starting to reshape how those services could be delivered. It kind of sets a model really of how we want to work going forward, both in terms of the right sizing and the asset and service devolution, using the expertise that we have in-house to be able to develop the right size of an organisation, but also the sorts of services we want to deliver, and then potentially working with those towns and parish councils. So our model of working, which will be considered in our right sizing business case, will be to utilise the resource we have internally as best as possible as we begin to either stop or reduce the scale of the services that we deliver.
Thank you. There is an interdependency between the two, there isn't there? You need the right size of council to deliver the savings, and to deliver the savings, you need the right size of council. So that'll be a challenge, I'm sure. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and welcome to the exciting world of local government finance at the moment. So you're absolutely spot on with that one. Councillor John Hunt was next.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, not an easy set of decisions to make at the full council on February the 20th. I appreciate anything happening here is just what's going forward to that full council. And on that basis, on pages 153, 154 and 155, we have 4 items there that I'd like to talk about, most particularly CMS 012, which is on page 153. I have emailed you all regarding particularly the situation in Vivery Park. where the proposal, not the proposal in front of us today, but to put forward to full council will be to actually not close Vivery Park at night and then again reopen it in the morning. If we don't do this, there will be, I fear, some serious consequences for those neighbouring properties in particular and the people of Taunton as well. We do have the email I sent you is actually representing in excess of 20 people from the neighbouring street there, who've all come forward to me to say, look, please don't close this. The gardens of their properties actually come onto Vivery Park, so the rear gardens come into the park itself. So it's quite an unusual situation they find themselves in. But effectively, if there are issues, and there will inevitably be issues of antisocial behaviour, impromptu parties, etc., going on in the evenings and overnight in the park there, and of course that puts their properties at serious risk. It also risks there's several businesses there, a bowling club, a golf club, and of course the cafe at the end of Vivery Park as well. It also puts those under a serious situation as well. I would submit to you that the not small savings, it's not a small amount of money, but the relatively small savings involved here will actually be way outweighed by the cost to Somerset Council and to a very much an extent to the police. I appreciate we don't pay the police, but they will have to start manning that part, which they don't now. And it will be a considerable amount of their time and resources will be going into that park. And from a Somerset Council viewpoint, clearly if there is vandalism, and sadly it's almost inevitable that will happen, the cost to the council, I would almost guarantee, will outweigh the savings involved. So in this particular case, I would ask you, certainly on behalf of the residents living close by to Vivery Park there, those residents living in Mount Street in particular, that we actually do not put this part of it forward. I'm not associated in any way in terms of it's not in my division, the Wellington Park or the Minehead Park that's also involved with this particular suggestion. But actually looking at both those parks this morning on the internet, it certainly seems to me that they will also have similar issues, and perhaps this is not a good idea for them and probably will also not be beneficial to the council anyway. So perhaps this not being carried forward is important. I'm thrilled to hear Councillor Deakin this morning, who, for those who are listening in who don't know what else he does, he's also leader of the Taunton Town Council. Hearing him discuss looking at CCTV, which is another thing I want to talk about as well. I fully support him with that. Much of my area is covered, my division covers the Taunton Town Centre and indeed the building we're sitting in today. And with CCTV, the benefits are obvious, and we've talked about that today, and thank you for the explanation on that. And I look forward to talking with him more about this as well. Very important the Town Council gets involved with that. The public toilets, which we're talking about closing as well under CMS 014, and the visitor centre to a lesser extent, but still a vital source of information for residents, not only in Taunton, but the other towns in which they reside, but particularly the toilets on page 154. I think the Town Council probably has most of the toilets in the town now. However, there are one or two, and they are vital for the town and certainly for the retailers in the town. Clearly, if you're caught short, you want to have somewhere to go when you're out shopping. So those are vital pieces as well. But I would like to, if I could ask that we take off in particular CMS 012, which is about Vivery Park in particular and safeguarding the residents of Mount Street. It is almost without question not a saving we're going to make. I think it will cost us more to do it. And thank you for listening to me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Do appreciate the representations you've made on behalf of your residents and neighbouring properties and across Somerset. As we pointed out right at the start, we're not making any decisions today. Those are all points that will be taken into consideration when we reach the point of a budget that we propose to full council, and then invite members to support. or not at full council. I'm aware that Councillor Deakin has been named. And he is welcome to respond if he wishes to. He's welcome not to as well, by the way.
Only to say, Leader, yeah, at Taunton Town Council, we're exploring all options and we'll be willing to do whatever we can to help continue some of the services that are listed today.
Thank you. Just looking at Mr. Hall as to whether anything he wants to add to that. No. Councillor Wakefield, is there anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to say that although these are proposals that we've got here and they're not agreed yet, it must surely be the case with the sort of budget gap we've got that if we cross anything off, we have to find something else to replace it. And that is the problem we've got, isn't it? Because I think councillors need to be aware that if they want to cross something off, they probably need to put something else forward that we could make a saving, which is very difficult to do. I
really don't want to go through every rabbit hole on every. There is plenty of scope for conversation about this later. But you would reiterate what the Chief Executive said earlier. It's about withdrawing the funding. It's not necessarily about withdrawing the service. And that's where we've got to make the distinction. I believe I'm right in saying that Apex Park is locked and unlocked at night, but not at the cost of this council. Volunteers do it. So it may well be that there are other alternatives of exploring to make sure it is. I'm also Apex Park. Okay. Very briefly.
Just briefly, then, if I could ask then, assuming we can find either perhaps Taunton Town Council or a volunteer group, perhaps reinstate the Friends of Vivery Park, which is now unfortunately not operating. But again, that would be work we can do to one side. But could I just ask for a guarantee that whatever situation is put in place, that they actually cross over properly? I think Councillor Dance mentioned it earlier on, that actually the service continues without there being a gap in the service, if you see what I mean, assuming we can find a partner for it.
Yeah, if there is, as we said earlier, if there is something that's clearly on the immediate horizon that we can put in place, it wouldn't be sensible to implement something and then withdraw it. And we're not doing the hokey cokey here. But at the same time, I recall when Sedgemoor District Council closed the toilets in North Petherton. It took us a little bit of time before we got a solution in place, and they were closed for a short period of time, and then we got them back open again once we found the funding and the people to do it. It's sometimes it can't be avoided, but in the case of something like Vivery Park, we'd fully appreciate that the potential issues would be significant. Can I assure you that people do enter Vivery Park after the hours that are scheduled to opening? And this isn't a confession from many years ago, honest gov. Hugh Davis.
Thank you, Chair. I feared that word Williton would appear in the closures. I'm very disappointed, and let's hope we can do something about it. Please, can I ask you, is there an opportunity that, i.e. Watch at Williton and Kill, from those places, could come up with a scheme to operate it? That's one question, Chair. The second one is, when this happens, will you be open longer hours or extra days? Because if we've got to go to Minehead, I'm going to say they're busy as they are now. So if they're not open all the week, we're going to be in trouble. So that's just a thought. And the final one is, please, regarding the green waste, is that still going to operate? You're only shutting depots. So is the green waste a separate identity?
Thank you, Councillor Davies. I knew at any mention of Williton, we might get a question from you. So I think you raised some really important questions, and all of those are things that would come out in the consultation with towns and parishes, and indeed the public, of like, so what can we do to make this better if that decision were to be made? So certainly there would be an exploration of options. It also gives me an opportunity to clarify what I said before. So I think I was asked about distances travelled between, should a recycling centre be closed? And I want to clarify that the 5 that have been identified, which are again not set in stone, that is based on costs per visit and per tonne, and the principle of having at least one site in each of the former council area available. Now, the problem that you have in West Somerset, as I know you know, Hugh, is you were amalgamated with Somerset West and Taunton, but the distances are enormous. So it is this question of rurality where, in a way, it disadvantages residents around distance travelled. So those will all things that would be considered through the consultation should some of these decisions be made. And in terms of the green waste collection just carries on as it always has done. So no change there. Thank you.
I believe I'm right in saying it's self-funding in effect, give or take. That was my recollection on that. So thank you, Hugh. We're now over to Francis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Something along similar lines and something slightly different. I am really concerned at the example that we've had of the impact assessment and indeed the consultation having to do the heavy lifting of properly considering a proposal. It seems to me extraordinary to come forward with a proposal which considers cost per tonne and cost per visit, but doesn't actually consider the geography. Now, it just seems to me nonsense to put that onto the consultation and the impact assessment. It suggests a shallowness of thinking which really worries me. That's one point, and I hope for other proposals we'll have the real thinking in the proposal before we get to the impact assessment. The next point is a little different. There's been talk about the larger parishes and towns and cities and their reaction and suggestion that the smaller parishes are not really engaged, or etc. etc. Well, there are two things here. One is it's a big rural county. There are areas where there is no large council. There are only small councils, and so it would be a mistake to base thinking on the idea that there might be a large proactive council in the middle of a set of people who really aren't quite up to it. It has to be everybody. There are not always the bigger places. And the other bit is that towns and parishes, even the smallest, have been very awake for a long time and very engaged with the problems and the things that need to happen. Not least because they are, particularly the smallest ones, so very closely in touch with the impacts both on their residents and the need for the greatest efficiency of use of money. And that's clearly money has to be used in the most efficient way possible. Otherwise, we damage people by using too much of it. They have been badly hampered by what has appeared to all of them a much later close engagement with the issues by this council. And I really do look forward to and hope for assurance that future dialogue between this council and local councils will be specific, accurate and solution focused, rather than being, as it has been perceived, away from the centre of discussions, as being more dramatic than informative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councillor Lyson, do you want to come in first?
Yeah, I think this one might be really more Councillor Philip, but I think that LCN pilot with the highway steward was done on Exmoor for the very reasons that have been explained by Councillor Nicholson. I just need to object to a term that not quite up to it. I certainly didn't say that, or words that meant that. I was trying to say that I really understand the concern of the smaller parishes. I was not denigrating in any way parish and parish councillors, because a lot of the most intelligent, informed questions I've received have been from parish councillors at their own meetings or at LCNs, and it has given me a real insight into the good work that goes on around the smaller parishes. So please don't ever think that I would insult them. Thank you.
I spend a lot of time travelling around the county visiting LCNs and city, town and parish councils. It's a great disappointment that I wasn't able to be with you on Exmoor last Thursday owing to a lack of childcare. You would have had me and the 3 kids, I'm afraid, so had to skip that one, but I will come and visit soon. I think what Liz has said is absolutely right. The ability of our city, town and parish councils across the county is incredibly impressive. Nowhere stands out more to me than actually many of the parishes of the former West Somerset district, which owing to their geography have taken on a number of services earlier than some others. I'm particularly impressed with the number of, relatively speaking, very small parish councils in West Somerset that run their own public lavatories, for example. It is nevertheless the case that we have had concerns raised on a number of occasions by the smaller parishes about the level of the things that they might be expected to take on. We will do everything we can to support them if they choose to do so, but we would never wish to denigrate the ability of those councils. I'm mindful of what Councillor Darch was saying earlier about the preservation of Mudford Rec. It is my belief that actually a number of the services and facilities that our communities expect and enjoy are best placed with city, town and parish councils, precisely because they have the local knowledge, the local commitment and the ability to work flexibly to protect those services. So we will do everything we can to ensure that we do support city, town and parish councils of whatever size in taking on any services that they think are important to their communities. I understand the concern about the inability to give enough specific detail as early as we would like. We have committed to sharing with city, town and parish councils the information we have as soon as possible. That has necessarily led to some very general communication to start off with, becoming progressively more and more and more specific. We now have approximately 40 city, town and parish councils across Somerset which have dedicated link officers with Somerset Council to help facilitate those communications, and I anticipate that number growing.
Thank you, Liz and Theo, for responses. I think it's 278 city, town and parish councils. They're all independent, sovereign bodies, and we treat them with a great deal of respect because of the diversity and variety of the communities that they serve. And you can't have the same conversation 278 times when some of those range from populations in the dozens to populations in the thousands, precepts equally as diverse. So we do appreciate everything that's gone on there, and that dialogue will carry on in the future. Now moving on, I think his last on my list is Lucy Trivial.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My questions are around 2 things. Firstly, there's a public consultation out at the moment on the budget. I wanted to know, firstly, when you expect it to be available for us to use as a basis for decision making. Will it be before full council? Secondly, what you plan to do with it, with the information that you glean from it, and also to make a point about the reduction in highway maintenance and devolution of service. I will keep talking about this. My parishes are telling me as well, they are very worried about this. I think we need to recognise the fact that we can't always fully populate parish councils. So sometimes they're already running on fewer members than they are supposed to have in full. They're often people who are, well, they are all volunteers, but they're often people who are older as well, who may not want to carry this on forever. What is the get out from this if a parish council finds itself in a situation where they do not have the personnel required to be able to take on such important services? Having seen the flooding recently, I was trapped in it myself, having seen the hazard from the verges not being cut last year. I'm really concerned about how parishes are expected or going to be able to manage such a huge and important role that really is community and actually just all user safety.
Yes, of course, Chair. Thank you, and thank you for the questions. In terms of the budget consultation, the budget consultation closes on 22nd of January, and the proposal is to have that available for debate at scrutiny, so that in debating and reviewing the savings options that are being prepared and in this paper today, they can be used to inform that debate on the 1st, and then ultimately being able to have the same information available along with the feedback from scrutiny into the consideration by executive of those budget proposals prior to presentation at council on the 20th. We're clearly, that timescale is incredibly tight, but I thank the team and everybody that's responded to the consultation responses so far, and we hope to receive more by the 22nd to complete that rounded picture, one would hope.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just come back on that? Just because I'm on that scrutiny, we're going to have just a couple of days to turn that round and to read it through and to base our questions on that. It might be worth just warning people now on that scrutiny to set aside some time to go through the information that you send to us ahead of that meeting, please.
The Chair, through you, if I may, absolutely. So steps are underway in order to ensure that we have clearly set out the scope and scale of the scrutiny, and a briefing will be issued to all members, and particularly scrutiny members, to set out the role and function of scrutiny, to be really clear around the budget, but also to be really clear the timescales for each of the subsequent reports. So again, you're absolutely clear on all of those requirements, but also the information you'll have at your fingertips to enable that debate. To your second point, and I'll do my best to answer it, and I'll refer to Mickey Green and colleagues if needed in terms of the wider responses in terms of highway maintenance. The proposal that we have, or not the proposal, the work that we've been doing in relation to piloting the highway steward is about utilising a trained and qualified member of staff, our contractor staff in this case, to carry out work at the discretion and instruction of a local community. A pilot that's been very successful, but that individual, that contractor in this case, has the skills, experience, the tools, the equipment they need to carry out that low level, that low tech intervention as part of that work. There are some towns and parishes that wish to carry out that work for themselves, and in doing so would have to be suitably qualified and would need to ensure the quality of the work they are undertaking. If they were to participate in the highway steward scheme, clearly all of the risks, issues, insurance and the like is all covered by the unitary authority. So it's an option that we are making available to those towns and parishes, and it's an option that I understand is also being considered by our new highway contractor when they take up that contract from April the 1st, 2024. So it's an option that's available to those towns and parishes rather than a prerequisite. But clearly we'll need to ensure that the maintenance of the highway network is up to those standards. But the highway steward has been a reasonably successful pilot, and one that has enabled a significant level of engagement, particularly in the Exmoor LCN area. But I'll stop there, and whether Mickey Green wants to add to any of that.
That's quite a full answer, so I'm not sure there's much to add, but it reflects the kind of conversation we had earlier in terms of active ongoing conversations, exploring different options that might mitigate these difficult options we're putting forward, with the intention then of bringing further information back through the democratic process as soon as we have it.
Okay, thank you. That Oh, Lucy, so do you want to come back briefly?
Only briefly, because that's the first time I've asked that question. At least, I reckon I've asked it twice, and I didn't know that the highway stewards were actually going to be something that was used as a solution to this. Parish councils haven't mentioned it, so is this a new idea or a new solution to this, or have I just missed something? Because I'm, pleased that there may be some sort of governance over this.
Mickey, do you want to come in on that?
It's a potential solution. Effectively, it's one of a suite of things we'll be exploring with the parish and town councils. But as Alan says, it has been, relatively speaking, successful. So we'd be mad not to explore something that's worked and see in these challenging environment whether it could be rolled out further. It's not the only potential answer to this, but clearly we need to have those conversations to explore.
Okay, Councillor White.
Thank you. At the last LCN I attended, a member of Alan's team did talk about the proposal, and it had a range of responses from the parishes there, but certainly it was on the table, and I understand it's going to be rolled out for discussion about LCNs.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I think it's good to hear that there's progress with that. It might be not quite as quick as some people would like, but I'm pleased to hear there is progress. I really do want to move on to the recommendations unless it's a substantive new point.
Just a helpful point to Councillor Trimnall, if I may. If she wants to check her emails, there was one that went out on the 13th of December, which details all the highway stewards information for you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for signposting that to Lucy and Ollie. Okay, so the recommendation that we have before us is that we recognise that council tax in Somerset is low compared to other similar councils due to historical factors, and that we formally request DLUC the option of allowing an increase in council tax by an additional 5%, so 9.99% in total, to £1,810.48 for the Somerset Council proportion of a Band D charge in order to set the 24-25 budget, to consult the Corporate and Resources Scrutiny Committee on the latest 24-25 budget proposals, including the savings proposals and council tax increases at their meeting on the 1st of February 24, and receive their feedback at our next executive meeting on the 7th of February, and to receive the business case for the creation of a sustainable council through resizing the council and creating a sustainable workforce transformation programme, including the estimated costs and savings from this in our next executive meeting on the 7th of February, and to note the Section 25 statement from the Section 151 officer on the robustness of the budget proposals and adequacy of reserves will be a separate report that will come to the 20th of February 24 council. Do I see a proposer from that from Councillor Lyshon, seconded by Councillor White? Okay, all those lead members in favour, please. Those against, then that is clearly carried. I'm aware that we've been going since 10 o'clock and it's now just before 1. Looking at the rest of the agenda, it doesn't seem, I think we'd probably be able to complete it within about half an hour. So I'm just looking for guidance as to whether to take a short, say, 10-minute break or 20-minute break now, and then come back so that we complete maybe by 2. Any advance on 20? Okay, we'll reconvene at 1:15 promptly. Thank you so much. Set and service devolution, and we've got Councillor Theo Butt-Philip to introduce.
Thank you very much. The devolution framework is an important step in our commitment to work with communities to ensure increased local influence on assets and service, as well as, where possible, supporting continuity and standard of service delivery in each city, town and parish. The framework is a culmination of work started before Somerset Council had come together and outlines the principles of how we will devolve assets and services to communities. The most important aspect of this is co-production. We are and have been working hard with our communities to ensure that they are aware of both the offer of devolution and how they can best participate, to ensure that they are either influencing, contributing, or taking on services and assets to the benefit of the local community. We have shared the draft framework with colleagues in the city, town and parish council sector. By following the steps in the framework, we are not only setting out principles and governance for devolution, we are helping to support continued service provision at a level appropriate for each community in a controlled and transparent fashion. Since Councillor Evans' letter was sent out to all city, town and parish councils in November, we've had approximately 120 responses, and we are working intensively with the sector to ensure that we are as clear as we can be about what could be devolved straight away, what could be devolved but over a longer period, and what may not be feasible and why. We are also noting where parishes feel they are unable to support this work, either through size, relative lack of services, or would just prefer not to at this stage, and are keen to keep communications open in those instances. Significant work is underway across the council to develop a clear programme of devolution. We are working through the detail of each request that we have had. A single point of contact has been established as a service director senior officer level for many of the larger city, town and parishes to both facilitate these conversations and reinforce the importance we place upon this work. In some cases, in principle agreements are starting to emerge. The Partnership and Localities team overseeing the development of wider devolution programme is working hard in hand with hand in hand with services, in particular parks and open spaces, assets and highways, to ensure that we're clear on the offer and how we might take forward a programme of devolution to be supported by the devolution framework and informed by wider council policies. Colleagues, Sarah Skirton and Scott Weech are here to add anything that I have missed out or answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. The only point I'd add to that really is, and Councillor Butt-Phillip has already referenced it, this work has been underway for quite a long time to pull together a framework. Credit to colleagues because it predated vesting day as part of the LGR work. We have also discussed with representatives from SOLC and SLCC and had feedback. What it does is it gives us that framework, and when the financial emergency was declared, we did consider whether it was still fit for purpose. And actually the conclusion from an officer perspective was it was actually even more important that we had a framework. We just needed to make sure it was agile and it was, proportionate in terms of what we're asking our partners to look at when they come and discuss with us about asset and service devolution. So hopefully the version that you have now as the draft does that. It also, before Christmas, was considered by Corporate and Resources Scrutiny. I think it's probably fair to say there was a robust discussion that focused particularly on the level of information that city, town and parishes were waiting for or expecting in order to be able to decide what they could support with. So we have been working as hard as we can with the sector and with their representatives to recognise on both sides that it is in some part iterative, and it is very much linked to the timetable for decisions about what savings this council may have to make. So I feel that we are moving forward in respect to some of the conversations that were mentioned earlier, and actually bringing the framework to this particular meeting, having just had the discussion around the budget, is really timely from our perspective. We're happy to take any questions you might have on the proposed framework and its principles. So yes, over to you, Chair. Thank you.
In a minute. Just looking around the table, look at Councillor Ros White first. Ros.
Thank you. I welcome this document. It's been long in the making, and I know that it's had a considerable amount of thought because this is a challenging area for us. I guess for me, there is something about some things which is silent on, which I think we perhaps need to sort of flesh out at some stage. And I'm sure you've already thought about it, and it might be helpful to just to articulate it a bit. And that is a number of people recognise that parish councils, as indeed with any council, do vary from time to time. Sometimes you have a very active councillor group and a very able paid officer, and other times that is not necessarily always the case. And therefore there is some concern about ensuring that the quality of services parishes take on are sustained over a period of time, because otherwise it will be perceived that we have handed over something and we're not caring about it anymore. And I know that's not the case, that we do want to make sure that whatever the parishes take on, that they do to their very best ability. And we not only support them, but have some very clear guidelines as to what the outcomes are going to be for the population, and also going forward how that is sustained and how we, if necessary, need to intervene in the future. And so I guess I was expecting to see something in the policy about recognition that we need to have an ongoing monitoring or some sort of role or recognition that there may need to be on occasion, hopefully not very often, a need to have some active intervention. And I don't know what thoughts you've had on this.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a really good question. In lots of ways, it depends on the nature of the devolution. What we're actually talking about. If it's something that this council is clear it is no longer in a position to be directly involved in and it's fully devolved, I think it's really, really important that the business case that goes forward to make that decision ensures the best chance of success and sustainability. It may well be that in every case, you know, years into the future, this cannot be guaranteed in the same way, but you would hope that if those services or assets are important to the community would carry on being interested, and we would be aware as a council and local members of that importance. If it's something where we do have retain a duty, for example, but perhaps there's more influence locally, then again, that would be subject to monitoring inevitably and making sure that the arrangement was working for all parties. I think it's a really good point. I think we can weave that into the process side of things and the check and challenge. So thank you.
Sorry, I just wonder whether you could move your microphone a little bit closer. Some members are struggling to pick up what you're saying. Thank you so much.
Chair, do I need to repeat anything or?
No, we'll send the edited highlights with subtitles. Ros.
I'll come back. I think what might be helpful is to actually, within the document, articulate an expectation that the services are continued and carried forward, and that there would be a dialogue informing the council if and when the parish then determines that the service, which may well be the right thing to do, should come to an end or it will be changed in some way. I just feel that as a responsible parent body, so to speak, I feel that we should have something in there which actually says we have an expectation for discussion and collaboration or whatever going forward as part of any devolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Point well made. I think we're all aware. I think Councillor Triminall made the point earlier of some parish councils struggling to fill seats, and certainly, you know, they're organisations that go through phases, and we need to make sure that resilience and sustainability is there as part of the process. I think that's the point that needs to be made. And I suspect that you know, once we hand something over, we hand it over. But we may need to be a supportive friend at times to make sure that it's sustainable once it has been handed over, to make sure that that there aren't any hiccups in the future. Not seeing any other comments or questions. Anything online? Oh, there's a surprise. It's Mandy.
Oh, I don't like to surprise you, Bill, so glad I'm so predictable. Just a couple of questions, if I may. The first one's around point 13, which is when considering any devolution of assets and services. Early conversations with organisations have been carried out for precept arrangements to ensure the financial sustainability of any proposal in the short term, whilst also keeping long-term aspirations under review. I couldn't get a sense of that. I couldn't quite make sense of what that paragraph was saying. So it's on page 181.13. And the other question that I had really is, within the potential cut savings papers that we've seen today, there are some quite big assets there, considerably sized assets with considerable running costs, sort of into the hundreds of thousands. And those assets often serve quite a large area, not just the town or parish that they sit in. And I'm just wondering how we square that with ratepayers in that if a town or parish took that on, but it's being used by many other people from other towns and parishes, I suppose, where's the equality in that for taxpayers? Because like I said, I think with small places, it's okay. I think when you've got a large facility used by lots of people, lots of different areas, what's the expectation then on the town and parish? Could it be that they cover part of it? And another town and parish nearby that also uses it heavily might not contribute. I'm just wondering how we deal with that sort of scenario that we might be faced with. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's a really interesting question. I remember, certainly when North Pellenton took on its community library, we turned around and said, well, what about those residents in neighbouring parishes that use it but obviously aren't contributing? And it was interesting chatting to some of the people who came for Yeovil Rec this morning that live over the border in Dorset. It's Sherborne and Yeovil Hockey Club. And I did suggest they write to Spencer Flower for a little contribution from Dorset Council. You can only ask, can't you? Who'd like to take the question?
I'm just trying to find the section 13 that you referenced, because I think you have different page numbers to me. But I think what it's saying is that it's important when putting together proposals for devolution that those conversations have been undertaken, so that we are assured that the body taking on any asset or service has the financial provision to be able to do so. In terms of where a service is used by different local communities, that is a challenge. That is an argument for having larger authorities like this one running services. It's an argument for properly resourcing them to do so. Unfortunately, that's an argument we haven't managed to win yet. And as we are not as well resourced, we will be looking more and more to the city, town and parish council sector to take on some of those items. There's no one right model for service delivery. It will depend on a case-by-case basis. So there may be areas where agreement should be reached and can be reached by a group of parishes, either by setting up some sort of umbrella body or by one of the parishes acting as a host organisation and each of them contributing to the management and indeed the funding of a service. So if that works, then great. On the other hand, if an individual parish wants to take on a service which benefits other neighbouring parishes, they may be able to do so. They may look, if it is an appropriate sort of service, perhaps to have a differential charging scheme for people who live outside their parishes. Very much up to each of them to work out their own solutions in tandem with Somerset Council.
Thank you. It just would have been nice to have seen some kind of wording around sort of, I suppose, multi-town and parish responses within the document. Just a suggestion. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy. Scott's got a little bit more to add.
Thank you. Just to add to the first part around the precepting, essentially what we had to do is have some very short-term conversations, because parishes and towns are precepting in the coming weeks, as you know, and so some of that conversation has to happen with a very short timescale, and then over a period we're looking to have longer-term conversations where it's appropriate to do so. So we've had to tailor those discussions according to short-term and longer-term need. So that's what that is alluding to, that particular section.
Thank you, Scott. Ros, did I see you indicate as well?
Yeah. Thank you. I think we need to also consider the fact that we've got both assets and services within this document. And while services we touched on and Theo's touched on the assets, we do have an asset disposal policy, which has to be, and it's legally binding in terms of how we manage assets. And those will need to be taken into consideration within the devolution discussion. So it's going to have to be, as I think Theo or Sarah indicated, a case by case basis as to how we handle services and also assets. It's not a one size fits all, and we do recognise that from both sides of the coin on this one.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Hunt, John.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I think it's touched upon actually since I wanted to ask the question, but the important thing to me, I know certainly local parish councils here, not in my area, but just on the outskirts, many of whom don't seem to get this whole thing about taking on their own services and are fairly concerned about doing it. And of course, that's a natural thing. But I do think it would be nice if they were more encouraged to group together, and perhaps if it is 3 small councils, they could perhaps group together, get their funds together, and share services between them, which would seem to make sense. And I don't get a feel of that happening. I may have that wrong, but I certainly don't have a sense that's actually happening. Thank you, Chair.
I suspect that's a journey we'll be on that might take a little bit longer than just the next year, but I think it's a point well made. Did we want to come back on that, Sarah?
Thank you, Chair. There are examples of that starting to happen. Some of the larger towns are talking to their neighbours, and actually perhaps where you might have thought they weren't necessarily partners in the past, it is actually bringing them to the table. We're watching that with interest and learning and encouraging those conversations. Apologies.
I know it's really difficult because the natural thing is to turn to the person who's asked the question, but you're the opposite way from the mic, so that our viewers at home can't hear you.
I do apologise. I will speak to the microphone, but yes, just to say that those conversations are starting to happen. We're keeping track of them wherever we can as well, and encouraging. We do have a fortnightly meeting with all clerks, or all clerks are invited to that as well, where we can share information, and we are encouraging our partners in the sector to actually take their to actually bring their examples to those discussions. So it's not all the council talking to the clerks, it's them talking to each other as well. And we are in discussions about how we might look at having more kind of workshops, conferences into this year to do that learning. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. And I mentioned North Petherton earlier, and of course, Alan Bradford appears on the big screen behind her. Hello, my friend.
Hello, Bill. How are you? I'm just there keeping an eye on you. How are you, anyhow? My question, Bill, you touched on North Petherton Library just now, and I'm just going to reiterate the importance of volunteers running these things. Without the volunteers, it would be a non-starter from the word go. And I think it's important that people know that, and it takes a lot of training for people to get up to this standard, so they're fully qualified to do what's got to be done, etc. So I thought it'd be worth sharing that view with you, because Petherton is usually ahead of the game. You know that, Bill. Thank you.
There's good reasons for that, Alan. Sarah.
Yes, thank you, and thank you for this paper. It certainly is welcome by the parish councils I represent in the area I represent, and there's about 10 parish councils, that includes 4 that meet together. And I would say there's a great difference in approach as way they're looking at this. Some of them are willing to put themselves forward or go to the LCN and have a chat about it. Others say, no, let's wait and see what happens. So they're not necessarily going to jump in straight away. I think some of them will watch what others do and see how it goes. And I think that's a perfectly reasonable, I've said that's perfectly reasonable, but I have encouraged my parish council to consider their precept and what they might want to do. But because we haven't been able to give detailed figures at this stage, it is really difficult to do that in the pressures that we're under. I think some of them are going to sit back and watch, or I think at least one or two of them are going to put their precept up and then say, well, if we don't, if we don't use it, we won't do that next year. We'll put it down or something. So I think there's a variety of approach going on, which I think is valid, and I think it does depend on your community. One parish council said, oh, we'll have to have a public meeting if we're going to do anything, and I said, well, if you want to do that, you can. They are elected representatives. Most of them, some of them are co-opted, but they're elected representatives. But no, I wanted to thank you for this, because I think it will help in the process that people know that there is something backing up the devolution and the idea of devolution. But obviously, it's the figures they really want, and they will come in time. Thank you.
Thea, thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Scott. I'm not seeing anybody else wanting to speak, so we'll move to the recommendation, which is to consider the overall approach to devolution set out in this report, which reflects the draft asset service devolution framework and agrees to adopt the draft asset and service devolution framework. And that's it. I have a proposal, please. Councillor Butt-Philip. Can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Wilkins. All those in favour? All those against? That's clearly carried. Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, we're signing off on the equality objectives and action plan from the peer challenge, and I'm just mindful that I don't have Councillor Adam Dance to introduce. Do we have a deputed volunteer, or we go straight to Angela? Absolutely, Alan. Do you want to?
Happy to do my best, Chair, to cover. Just in terms of the main essence of the paper, what we wanted to do really is set out the key steps that were being taken and effectively an update to executive in terms of the follow-up to the peer review that we had, and establishing essentially the next steps to that. So not only setting out the findings of that peer review, but also, to be frank, what we're doing about it and the activities that we will be taking over the next year to 18 months to develop that further. Also, as part of that, we're making sure that we have completed a number of key steps, and really since the peer review, the key steps that we wanted just to kind of cover off here were around the equality framework for local government, the self-assessment, and that's now been completed. We've also had the internal race audit, and also completed the first draft of our disability confident leader audit as well. All of which have kind of helped to shape and formulate the work that we'll be doing around our equalities impact assessment work, but also ensuring that we have that embedded within the operation of the authority, and it also feeding into the culture and behaviours of our new council as we move forward. So that's all part of those critical elements. We were really clear, and you were really clear, why you wanted to see that peer review come in so early in the life of our new council, and making sure that we had an understanding of the behaviours and performance in that area that we had at that particular time, but also particularly the types of activity that we need to embed in order to improve our practice moving forward. So that's what this paper is intended to do, to really show what the next steps are, but Angela will cover that far more eloquently than I will.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, members. Yes, as Alan has said, I'm here to update you on 3 pieces of work: the Disability Competent Leader Assessment, the Internal Race Audit, and obviously the outcome of the peer challenge. If I take that in reverse order, so the Disability Competent Leader Assessment, we have done the piece of work. We're just waiting, or just seeking, external validation of that piece of work. We're hoping North Somerset might do it for us, but we're certainly in discussions to find an external validator for that piece of work. In respect of the Internal Race Audit, that report has been done. The audit is expected sometime this week. From that, we'll contemplate and see what has come from that, what we can do and what we can't do, and we'll come back to you with an action plan and a copy of the report to set out for you what the findings were. In respect to the peer challenge, the final report is received. It's attached to the report for you. We have done an action plan, and again, we're looking to agreement from that action plan, and again, that's Appendix 2 of the report today. The focus of the action plan has been primarily on ensuring that we pick up the pieces of work that will make us ensure that we're legally compliant across the board. The more developmental stuff hasn't been done as yet. That's not to say it won't be done, but we're focusing on ensuring that we've got any legal compliant work done. The final part of the report today, members, is to seek agreement to our new equality objectives for Somerset Council. In the past, we've done that as a collective body of objectives across all of the public sectors. That includes our partners in health, fire and police. We've gone divergent, we've diverged from that. It wasn't a great success for a number of different reasons. And we are now seeking to have our own set purely for Somerset Council. We've gone through and we selected 6 draft objectives. They're set out in the report for you. And we undertook a series of consultations between September and November. In all fairness and in all honesty, it wasn't a great success. We had a limited response to the consultation. I'm really unclear as to why it was so low. It's always a difficult time to judge these things, and we have gotten some concerns about some specific communities. However, it has been done. We have done it, so we are going to take on the information that we've gathered from that particular consultation. But as with everything, we'll learn our lessons and try and some more creative approaches, as Tom would put it, for the next time we go out for the consultation on the objectives. Part of our legislation, part of the Equality Act and part of the public sector equality duties require that we set equality objectives every 4 years, or certainly review them every 4 years. In this particular instance, we are looking to set the equality objectives just for 2 years. Now, that's been done with a particular concern in mind, obviously, and as the discussions have emanated from this morning's discussion, you know, we will probably be we will be moving into a different organisation over the next few years. So when we go out to renew our objectives in late 25, then we'll need to be reflecting on what the organisation looks like at that point. But before you today are 4 objectives that we're looking to take forward, 3 that are more, I suppose, a combination of external, internal facing, and 1 very specifically internal facing. So the first one is to work across council services and with external partners to deliver a minimum of 2 initiatives that will improve people's access to information services who would otherwise digitally excluded by December 25. By 2025, and by working with partners from across the county, improve access to and information about public amenities and services for those residents who are otherwise excluded by disability. And 3, a reduction of 15% in the number of cases of school-based peer-on-peer discrimination by April 26. The 4th objective, which will emanate from, and the work will emanate from the report on the race audit, is to work towards being an anti-racist organisation with a review of progress by December 25. Now, one of the things that you will notice from there is they are quite specific objectives. We have got what you might term SMART part being built into them. That is certainly something that the Equalities and Human Rights Commission is pushing authorities to do, so they're not a bit wishy-washy. They've got a clear focus and they've got a clear you can monitor the performance of those as we go through. As I said, we haven't delivered an action plan yet. We will be doing that in April and May. We've started the bare bones of it this week. We hope to start populating that. Some of that work will need to be done with services, so that's probably post budget decision. So some of that work will be done in March when we've all got a little bit more of a clearer calendar. And we'll look to see how services will be looking to deliver, say, like the digital agenda and other things like that. So that action plan will come back to you probably in the spring sometime, and we'll give you an update on that work. And also we will also endeavour to set out how we'll be monitoring and keeping members updated on our progress in delivering against a number of pieces of work. So the peer challenge, the race audit, and obviously the delivery against our objectives. So that's for me. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Angela, and thank you to you and Tom for all the hard work you do. I know it's a particularly difficult time. We've got a number of equalities impact assessments we've had.
We've got about 75 at the moment, 75 to 80 at the moment. So good luck, members. Indeed.
So thank you so much. It is appreciated, and we know it's essential. And it's not an ideal time to be doing that. I just wanted to convey my thanks for that. Also, just while we're kind of in this area, just to say how disappointed, how angry I was to see the Rainbow Path being attacked in Taunton, but also that there was racist graffiti nearby, and also the reports of racist graffiti in Yeovil as well. It's really disappointing that a few individuals let the rest of us in Somerset down, and I hope that we stand shoulder to shoulder with those people impacted. Heather.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to the team. I won't turn around because you won't be able to hear me, but thanks to the team for putting this together. It's really important work, and I'm always impressed by how much we managed to get done with quite a small resource. It was just a question really, because it is a shame also to hear that perhaps the consultation didn't get quite the number of responses that you wanted, and I just wondered if there was a residents or customers panel that we could seek some feedback from, just to find out why perhaps it didn't land as well as we might want to. It's a small thing, I'm sure you're thinking about it already, but I just think it'd be quite nice to get as much people's feedback on this as possible.
We are hoping to do some work with our VCFSC colleagues, probably May or April-May time, and we'll certainly be raising it with them. I think we've probably spoken to a number of individuals, and really it was timing. It's like anything, isn't it? It's back to school time. It's all the financial stuff was starting to come out, budgets, pressures, that sort of thing. And for a lot of people, they won't see it as anything. You know, if you take the budget consultation to the equality objectives consultation, the budget consultation would be more important to people. And we respect that. But at the end of the day, I think we probably need to be more creative. I went to a couple of forums with our VCFE colleagues, and it was quite clear their minds were elsewhere. Their minds were about funding. Their minds were about, you know, trying to keep services going. They're not necessarily about, you know, the equality objectives, which to them are somewhere up there. So yeah, so we will look to do it, but I just think it's just timing. But we will pick it up with our VCFE colleagues as well. So.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other. Oh, hello, Sarah.
Just wanted to say, actually, rather on what you've just said, Angela, that, you know, this is part of the good news of what this council is doing. We are doing this and we're making a good job of it, and it needed to be done. So I am very proud that we are doing it, and I'd like to thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you. I'm just going to other members, and Lucy.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. Obviously, the team is very small. The equality impact assessments are very important in guiding our decisions. There isn't one yet for the budget, the papers, the proposals, and I wondered, firstly, are they going to be with us in time to make these decisions? And also, have we got the capacity within the team with so much work coming forward over the next few months? Is there the capacity to be able to deliver the information that we need to make good decisions?
Thank you, Lucy. Going to pass that on to Alan.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, an excellent question, and it's one that we ensured right from the start of the budget setting process. We set up a broad spectrum group, effectively an assurance group, to ensure they are aware at an early point of the savings proposals as an option, that they were being developed, but also making sure they're working with services to complete the necessary assessments associated with them. And rather than that being seen as a process, moreover, an iterative dialogue with them around some of the impacts, the quality issues that are there. So that's been going on for a little while in ensuring that the savings options that are being considered are deliverable and the impact would be understood. That work is nearing completion in order to complete the cumulative impact assessment. In terms of the resourcing point, undoubtedly it is stretched. Of course it is, especially with budget proposals of this scale. However, the team have worked incredibly hard, utilised the resources within those teams and officers that are presenting these savings options. And then finally working through to the ultimate deadline of being able to publish those papers, and to reassure you that is the absolute intent, to be able to have that information not only of the full scope of the savings options that are being considered by scrutiny and ultimately executive, but also the associated impacts of those proposals in detail.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing anybody else, so I'd like to move to the recommendations. So we're being recommended to agree that the action plan in response to the LGA peer challenge reports, the 4 equality objectives that will take effect from April 24, noting that further work will need to be undertaken to develop the actions to deliver the objections from April 24, and a further report to be made to the executive when the actions have been developed and agreed by relevant services, and to note the progress that has been made on the race audit, and to note the disability confidence leader assessment will be completed by the end of January, with external validation completed by April. Oh, yeah. Where it says objections, it should be objectives. As I was reading it, I thought that word isn't right.
It's right.
It's right in the paper, but wrong on the chair's notes. So I'm not sure how spell check managed to do that, but does are we covered off if it's right in the paper, but not? Yeah, we are. Okay, so we don't need to do an amendment. So I need a proposer, please, Councillor Shearer, seconded by Councillor Butt-Phillips. All those in favour, please. All those against, that's clearly carried. Thank you, Angela, and thank you to, well, I was about to say all your team, but to Tom. So we move on to item 10, which is the Somerset Strategic Migration Board. As you'll all be aware, we have an increasing number of displaced people because of travels in other parts of the world that are seeking refuge in this country, and we've made a commitment to do whatever we can to support people who are in that position. And as part of that, as those challenges become more significant with the numbers increasing, we are setting up the Somerset Strategic Migration Board in order to pick up this piece of work. And I'd like to hand over to Chris to take it further. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Chair. Very little more I'd like to add, really. The board is relatively straightforward. It is a way of coordinating the views and the thoughts of key partners, multi-agency board, including the voluntary sector, the police, yourselves as member representatives there will be. So it's just an opportunity to make sure we coordinate. We're able to get a clear voice back to government where we need to do that. We're able to coordinate the projects which are happening and the new accommodation which is taking place in the area. And there's also a very large spend as well due to the subsidies which come through from government. So the migration board is a relatively straightforward type of body which the council will lead, and it will help us just coordinate in one voice what we are doing in this area.
Okay, thank you very much. Any comments, questions, queries from lead members or associates? I think we've been previously briefed on this, so I think we're okay. Councillor Lysham.
Thank you. The second recommendation is to nominate up to 2 members to sit on this board. As you know, we already have Councillor Fran Smith. I was hoping that we might be able to propose an amendment today to delegate to the monitoring officer to confirm the second name for that board, and to report it as our next reporting on outside bodies, internal and external partnerships. If that's possible, please.
Okay, I need a proposer and seconder for the amendment proposed. Councillor Lysham, seconded Councillor Shearer. Who are there? Is there anybody wanting to make comment on this? I'm not seeing anyone, so we move to the vote on the amendment first. Those in favour, please show. Those against. So we have a substantive which hasn't been proposed or seconded. So proposed by Councillor Lysham, seconded Councillor Shearer. Those in favour and those against. Thank you so much, colleagues, and thank you, Chris, for your patience in sitting through quite a long meeting to get to a very short agenda item, but much needed, and thank you for your work on this as well. And so under item 11, we have the decision to award contracts for early help and prevention services in Somerset. The main just a reminder that the main report for this item is not confidential, but supporting appendices to members may contain exempt information and are therefore marked confidential. They're not for publication. If any member does want to discuss that, we then have to pass a resolution to exclude the press and public. I'm aware that we have press and public online, so we would need to pass that resolution and boot them off the call. So if everyone's happy not to go into that level of detail on this, then we can avoid having to go through that trauma. Okay, I think I was down to just introduce this as covering the adult social care portfolio for the meantime. I think there's a case of this does exactly what it says on the tin, because it's about early help and prevention services. So I'm just going to hand directly over to Mel to fill us in.
No problem at all. Vicky and Laura are both poorly today, who wrote the report. I think they both got COVID, but I know Vicky's online if you're going to ask me any very difficult questions. The rest I'll manage. So as you said, the paper is here to request a decision to award the paper around our carer support services and our agency services. This contract ends on the 31st of March. It's a recommissioning, and we've recommissioned this service. We've undertaken a review of the service. We've looked at what it does. We've engaged with our health colleagues, our social care providers, our voluntary third sector, and most importantly, those that draw on our services have helped co-design some of this along with our carers. A full procurement process was undertaken as part of the ward, and a single provider has taken this contract up for us if you agree to this today. And as you said, there's confidential papers in the appendix. The service fundamentally is there to achieve our early help and prevention. What it does do is it supports people so that they do not end up coming into our statutory services, but actually works alongside us. It helps us, it augments our services, and it really helps support people to, as we all know, live long and independent lives as much as possible. The aim of the service is, as we've said, to maximise people's independence, to help them to remain in their local community, cost effective, flexible, and meets individual needs, which is what people want. The carer support service is its own identity with its single point of contact for carers to either self-help through tailored resources and information that we have, or to receive one-to-one support through the agency service. This agency service is extended part of adult social care workforce. It is part of what we do. However, it is a whole family approach, which is really important that we understand that and we continue to do that. So it supports people through local community solutions. And although it's a single provider, we can ensure, because of that, we can ensure the efficiencies and maximise the reach across the county to identify more carers, which we need to do, more people in need of support, and prevent them from reaching crisis, reduce or delay, and the need for our long-term statutory services. So the paper gives additional information in terms of the high impact of the services, the costs that it does save, and the financial savings. We therefore seek to approve the award of this contract to enable these vulnerable services to continue going forward, and this contract would commence, if approved today, in April this year. To any questions?
Thank you, Mel, and I've got Heather and then Ros. So Heather first.
Sorry, thank you, Mel, for describing that so well, and for Bill for introducing it. I would absolutely urge us all to support this as much as possible. This early help is really essential. It's not going to solve every single crisis out there by any means, but it's going to do an awful lot to keep people independent, and it does work across the family. So with my children's hat on, as well as my old adults hat on, I see that as really beneficial, and it's part of what we need to be doing to keep our communities resilient and also our people resilient. So I'll be putting my hand up to support it.
Thank you, Heather. And Ros?
Thank you. I'm very conscious that an awful lot of the savings we've been discussing today are preventative services in one shape or another, which the districts particularly were responsible for. So I'm really pleased to see that at least we've got one service here which is doing the prevention piece, and I hope in time to come that we will increase our prevention work it was always part of our original manifesto. We wanted prevention to be top of the table. We know full well that we pays dividends both short term and long term. So I'm very happy to support this. And I just think that we need to recognise that where we've had to reduce many of the non-statutory prevention work, I'm delighted to see this one still here.
Sarah, Councillor Wakefield.
Yeah, can I just ask a question? We could talk about item 10, Appendix A, can't we? That's not.
You can talk about Appendix A, but not
Yeah.
Appendix B.
Well, in Appendix A, it does say and about the bid responses that we didn't get bids for 2 lots. I'm just going to ask what's going to happen about that service and whether it'll be picked up by voluntary or what will happen.
What we've done is amalgamated it into one, so it is with this provider.
Okay, thank you. Not seeing anybody else. Nobody online. Okay, so I need a proposer. Councillor Shearer, seconded Councillor Wilkins. Now, we do have a typo amendment, which is in D. It says Appendix 1 rather than Appendix B. So a slip of the keyboard there. Do I need a proposer and seconder for that amendment?
If the same clause and secondary agreement.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, so are we happy with that? We are happy to take that as a drafting amendment. So we have a proposal to approve the outcome of the procurement exercise, to grant a delegation to the Executive Director for Adult Services to agree the case for applying exempt information, and that we would have excluded the press and public if anyone talked about Appendix B. But thank you so much for not doing that. All those in favour of that recommendation? All those against that recommendation? That's clearly carried. Okay, so I need to advise you that we are next meeting on the 7th of February. It says John Meikle room here. Is that still the case? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so we will be returning here on the 7th of February. And thank you so much, everybody, for your attendance and contributions today, for what has been an interesting meeting, and we look forward to seeing the highlights on BBC Television News later on. So thank you so much.